We're at then. Let's see here. I still need to post this up on the old Game Geek Guild. We are live, but I am not 100% ready to go yet. Episode 175, post Gen Con 2018. Subscribe. All right. And then cross post on the Facebook, because there's like 20 people that might actually see it there. Yay. And now let's figure out, is there, I know Mur was going to join us, but he might not be there right at the second we're ready to record, which, I mean, hey, at this time, Mur, if you ever do hear this, we were here and I clicked record at 10 o'clock a.m. on the dot. So for the record, exactly when we said, and we have a viewer. Let's see. I've got the chat right here, Trent. We'll see if it's actually Mur. Maybe it'll be some of those folks from last night that were saying, please respond, please respond, please respond. That's what trolls say now, apparently, in comments.
Yes.
They say something that doesn't make any sense, and they say, please respond, which, I mean, maybe it's just what 8-year-olds have learned will get them attention from people who otherwise would just ignore their comments because they don't make any sense. All right, dude, I got my Diet Dr. Pepper. We've talked a little bit how we're going to do this. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, a podcast about board games. I'm the host of The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, Joe Sallin, and I'm joined today by Trent, who is in ways me and Trent shared in an experience while not really getting a chance to see or talk to each other for more than a couple of minutes. I'm talking about the experience of Gen Con 2018, and I have Trent Ham here to talk about it with me. Trent, how are you doing?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Well, we've got this bonus episode structure here, so it feels a little bit weird to be recording like when it's low. When I'm like, whoa, I feel like I have the energy of the day in my system. So, and for you, I bet that's kind of a difference for you as well, because you're usually like exhausted from a day of running the family, right?
Yep, but not today. I should be pretty good.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, speaking of running the family, when we were at Gen Con, Trent, Fish. By the way, welcome Colin. He's here to join us at this as we embark on this off time. Hey, there's Mert. He's there too. So we got a couple of our. I need to get you guys like some stripes for each. Every time you make it through another 25 episodes with us, every time you make it through 25 episodes, you get like another star, another stripe, or like how they do that with football helmets, how they do like, marks, for every time that you get a concussion or whatever it is that they give us for. We should do that with like little bullet hole decals to put on like some sort of a thing. And then that'll be, you get one of those, and then you'll be able to show people how many you've been through. But then again, you just that would just make people think so little of you, because you're listening to us and you're staying with us, and it means so much to me, but to other people, they might judge you for it. And I wouldn't blame them for judging you. So, but speaking of Gen Con 2018 and speaking of running the family, Trent, that was why, and as I mentioned earlier, we didn't get a chance to see each other a whole ton, at least on your side. I had my own things, but you were with your family at Gen Con.
Yes, I was. My whole family went, my wife, my 3 children, and myself. And my children are between the ages of 8 and 12, so that made a bit of a different experience for me. And my children are between the ages of 8 and 12, so that made Gen Con a different experience for me.
You sound okay. So it wasn't the Gen Con that maybe you had come to expect?
No, I typically, when I go by myself, which is the norm For me, I fill pretty much every spare moment with some sort of demoing or event or tournament or something. That was not. You can't do that with three children. It just doesn't work.
That was a joke, and it was. Oh man.
There's a crafting room on the second floor. I think it's room number 209. It's just craft stuff.
Yeah, well, there was there's like a few different sort of. I was trying to find one of the 200s, and I didn't realize that like the area I was looking for, like apparently I just couldn't find my way around because I do not think it was connected. Like I was trying to find the Rio Grande and the Czech games rooms, and I ended up I'm like what where is everything? Everybody here is knitting in this room, and then I went over to this room, and it was like everybody was crafting with like things like sequins and glitter.
Yep.
And maybe some nice chevrons and stuff, Colin. So you were in that room.
Yes, we spent some time in that room doing various crafting things. A lot of times, what it was is we would make various things, and they would be unpainted, and we'd go in there and use their supplies to paint. My children spent also a significant amount of time in the family fun area over in Lucas Oil Stadium. So we'd finish a project over there, and then we would basically clear out space for other people to use it over there. So then we would have like an unpainted mask. So we come back to the family fun room and paint the mask.
Cool. So they actually provide all those paints and all like they pretty much provided for you in those areas.
The crafting room is free. All the family fun zone stuff is free over in Lucas Oil.
Excellent. They don't even require no generic tokens or anything no generic tickets to wait. Wow, that's fantastic.
There's also free miniature painting if you know where to look. Just they give you a miniature, they give you paints, they give you brushes. You sit down for an hour and paint. There's people walking around that will give you advice and suggestions. Doesn't cost a ticket, doesn't cost anything.
Well, that's really interesting, Trent, because in my experience at Gen Con, it feels lost money. Even if I want to bring my board game and teach a group of people that I've attracted, even if like I just want to do everything with my own stuff, just that table is I'm gonna be required to charge. I believe it's $2 for every 2-hour session. And if you want to charge anything for yourself, it's in addition to that. So it seems like that's about the best deal you can get in Gen Con. And it's kind of cool at the very least that they weren't sitting there like wanting to play the arcade and begging you for quarters.
Yeah, I mean, we did do a little bit of arcade. They had an arcade room that you could pay tickets to get into for an hour, and we did do that for a while. Speaking of that, there was a game in that arcade room called Killer Queen that my children absolutely fell in love with. But that's an arcade game. But beside that, I mean, you can do that stuff, but there's plenty of free stuff if you're looking around.
Very cool. So Killer Queen, is this we've got the new biopic, right? The new biopic musical pick coming out that's supposed to be the story of Queen and their musical biography sort of thing?
No, it's nothing about that. It's like there's an old arcade game called Joust, and it's a lot like that.
Oh, okay.
It's like a side-scrolling arcade game, but it's like I don't even know how to describe it. It's a 5-on-5 game, and my children really got into it. It was pretty intense for them.
Well, and that you said that it was a pretty cheap, like you paid to get in, and then you could just keep on playing. That sounds like a pretty cool environment. That's like better than Dave and Buster's.
Yeah, it's basically you get in there for I don't remember what the cost was. I'd have to go look it up. But you pay a very small number of generic tickets, and you go in there, and basically all the machines are unlocked. So you just hit the start button, and it starts playing. There are a whole bunch of arcade machines in there. I mostly just played old retro stuff from when I was a kid because that's what I do in arcades. So.
Yeah, it's like the nostalgia element, and I probably like you put that big old X-Men video game that has the huge panel, and it's got I think support for 4 players, which was pretty awesome at the time. Maybe even you could go up higher than that, but that side-scrolling hack slash X-Men game, I could totally see myself getting a group together and just trying to power through that one, especially if we didn't have to keep forking over quarters. Well, there's a lot of just in general family events that you're going to be telling us about what you enjoyed, and so we won't spoil too many of those. But I'd like to contrast your experience, which involved a lot of non-gaming, like sort of miniatures, painting, and other types of related events, to what I was doing, which was largely combing the dealer hall. I did not realize like that to try to actually like get a time to one-on-one have a discussion with every board game publisher there that sort of showed up on my radar would actually take me as long as it did. I started in the farthest corner of the dealer hall and just kind of started walking down, and then I went one aisle up and then one aisle down, and I just kept on doing that. And I realized I'd gotten not even a third of the hall done in the first whole day, and there's only 3 full days that hall is open. And I was not planning on staying till Sunday. I did end up changing my plans just because I had to, man. I didn't get to so many things. And I spent most of my time speaking with publishers, and that'll be what most of what I have to offer. I'll maybe slap a little bit of a review in there, but I'm just going to be looking down. If you want to see sort of a bunch of pictures that will describe the events that I'm talking about here, follow at GoodBoardUgly on Twitter, and you'll be able to see all the pictures I took from Gen Con. There's like at least 100 of them. It's just a whole ton, wealth of stuff. So without further ado. Well, actually, there is some further ado, and it's definitely some further ado because it's our sponsor, Game Surplus. Check them out at GameSurplus.com, where Carmen is bringing the world of board games to you, to me, and to all of our friends who happily shop with him because he's a wonderful individual who's been spreading the love of board games since long before he took over Game Surplus, the online mom-and-pop board game store. All right, so starting out here, my first night, Trent, did you get there on Wednesday night? Were you there, like, staying on Wednesdays?
We got into town on Wednesday midday, and I met up with my wife and kids. Did some other stuff. They had some stuff they wanted to do on their own that didn't involve me. So I met up with a few people at my hotel, and then we all went downtown. And I ate dinner with some people, but I also walked over and went to the Fantasy Flight in-flight report. And then met back up with those people, and that's pretty much my Wednesday.
So there actually is some sort of not just press-related events, but like I think they call it Trade Day on Wednesday, and that's kind of what that Fantasy Flight in-flight event was about. And you've shared with us on our upcoming episode, actually, recorded it in the past. So the Fantasy Flight, you just barely missed out on the good stuff.
Yes, I went to it and I listened to all their announcements and everything was great. And at the end, Richard Garfield came out and he was talking about Keyforge, which I guess I can elaborate on now. But he talked about it a little bit, and then I had to split. I had to go because there was people I was meeting up with. So I walked out, and apparently I walked out a minute out Keyforge decks and gave everybody one. So I just completely missed that. I was aware of the announcement and I heard some of it, but I did not get a deck. I don't know what the scoop was, like why I missed it or something, but yeah.
Just barely, huh? Too bad, man. Too bad. So on Wednesday, actually, we got in so late, I think it was like 9 or so, that it was a matter of like settling into I went out to Gen Con with a buddy of mine, Kyle, who's local and is actually kind of a member of the podcast community, listens to the podcast, and he has this awesome uncle who's was like able to let me stay at his place, and so it was nice getting to meet them. And that wasn't all, though. I also connected with a board game designer with whom I had some interactions online, and his name is Luis, and so. Luis, it was Luis's first time in the Midwest. I believe it was his first time in the Midwest, but it was definitely his first time getting taken to a pinball bar. So you'd mentioned doing some arcade stuff. Well, Indianapolis actually had a pinball bar called, I believe, it was something like Sinking Ships, I think. So Sinking Ships was a pinball bar, and we got a chance to like play all kinds of pinball. The running, or what is it, Demolition Man pinball that has like, instead of regular flippers, it has like 2 little like triggers that are like gun triggers on the sides, and there was just a ton of cool stuff. They had a lot of local beers on tap, and I got a chance to introduce a guy that I had known for a long time but never met in person. That was like a nice thing to sort of connect with. I know that like that's what a lot of people will be doing on Wednesday, is like trying to connect with the group that they're going to be running with. For the entirety of Gen Con. And obviously, Trent, you came with your posse, and you knew who you were going to be, who you're going to be there with. But I was still trying to figure out, like exactly who am I going to walk up and down the halls with. Spoiler alert, I ended up doing most of what I did alone. But Luis was there to support his game, which I will talk about later on. So that was my Wednesday. I did not really go to many trade day things just because we got into Indianapolis late and wanted to make sure I was settled and actually take time to meet my hosts and whatnot. So, but that trade day seems like a lot of really cool stuff, and I'm thinking, like in the future, I want to get more of an experience with it. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My wife had such a badge, and it's cool. There's a lot of stuff going on there.
Mm-hmm. So that Fantasy Flight in flight announcement thing was for Keyforge, which is just taking the whole gaming world by storm. The new collectible card game sort of format. It's like living card game, collectible card game. Every deck is unique. That sort of like jaw dropping. Oh my goodness! You mean if I spend $10 on a deck, I have to play with that exact deck, and there's no way for me to play with anything else? Like that sort of a feeling. I think that's really surprised a lot of people that is going that route. It also seems like it will be a financially, you can go ahead and keep purchasing all the decks you want, but you really only need one. So $10 could be as good as $2,000, just, depending on what your approach is. So Trent, how are you thinking you're going to approach Keyforge? First of all, are you going to engage with this system? And second of all, would you own multiple decks? And if so, like, what types of would you be like? How do they even sell them? Do you know? Do they sell them?
So here's how the game works. So you buy. There's a starter set that they're coming out with. I think its MSRP is $39.99. It includes a bunch of tokens and crap that you kind of need to play the game for 2 players. It also includes 2 default learning decks. They're not real. I don't know whether those are tournament legal. I don't think they are. I'm not sure about that, whether or not if they have a Keyforge tournament that you could use them or not. I don't know. But there comes with 2 decks that you can learn how to play the game with. They're both 37 card decks because that's the size of a Keyforge deck. Because Keyforge decks are made up of 12 cards each from 3 different factions, and then what amounts to a commander. And if you're looking at Magic the Gathering commander format, it's a lot like a commander. He's like the central guy for your deck. So every deck has 37 cards. The starter deck comes with 2 37-card decks and a bunch of tokens and crap. Then after that, the only other product related to it, at least at this point, is just one of those random decks for $9.99. There's billions and billions and billions of possible different decks. When you buy it, it's made up of 3 different factions, 12 cards from each, plus 1 Archon, which is like the main character guy. And they have a unique, they all have a unique back that only exists for that deck ever.
How many Archons did you say there was?
There's a lot. I don't even know.
Okay, so there's a lot. And do you know in advance, do you know anything about the composition of the deck? Do you at least know the Archon or anything like that? Or
I don't believe so. They haven't really specified a lot of that. I know that the set supposedly has 370 cards total in it. And people are kind of speculating as to what that 370 is made of. I mean, my speculation is there's 20 different Archons, and then each of the 7 colors has let's see, that would be 50 cards. That's my guess. I don't know that that's entirely accurate or 100% true. There might be more.
Sounds mathematically sound based on what we know.
There might be more Archons and less per color. I don't really know. That's hard to know. But then out of those 50 per color, you get 12 of them in a semi-random fashion in your deck. And your deck's made up of 3 of the colors, and then one of the 20 Archons. That's what people are kind of speculating. I haven't seen any hard numbers on that, other than a lot of people are saying that there's definitely 370 cards in it. They're not truly random in the colors. They're making some it has so many of this, so many of that, so many of that.
I feel like if you just did truly random, you just get some decks that were absolute garbage.
Yeah. I think so, and possibly some that are ridiculously OP. Who knows? They said that they have done some things to make sure that nothing is blatantly OP out of the box. I will say that I demoed the game at the Fantasy Flight booth during one of the little windows when I had a little bit of time, and I felt like when I was playing it that the deck I was playing would reward some replay. You don't just sit down and steer it. You have to think through and know your deck's contents and know what the combos you're looking for are and know what you're doing to steer it. It's not just blatantly go in there and smash face or go in there and try to draw cards. It really depends on the composition of your deck and knowing how to play it. And if they're each like that, that makes the game more interesting to me. So my intent is
no more net decking, right?
Yeah, there's no such thing. The only sense there would be any form of net decking in this is that Fantasy Flight's going to supposedly push organized play a lot in this. Like they're going to have leagues and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And what you do is when you play a game, you register your deck name, and then like they keep track of your deck's record online. I could see if this game was popular that a popular deck might have some substantial replay value if people are really into it. Like this deck is really good. You can go get it. Someone will sell it to you for 40 and look at the track record online. I can see that happening. I don't.
Yeah.
It's hard to even tell whether that will or not. Who knows? No one knows at this point.
Yeah.
But
there's a lot of question marks, right? Because it doesn't officially launch until September.
yeah.
So you won't actually be able to see anything about this for another couple of weeks or a few weeks here at least. But it's a really interesting concept. I would say visually, it's a much more inviting type game. Kind of has a little bit of a cartoony, almost like a League of Legends type, cartoony look to it.
I felt it was very much League of Legends style art. That was my reaction as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is to me like unique among the collectible card games or living card games. Usually very very brown and black and dark sort of hues, and this was a much more cartoony vibe. So, but the idea behind it sounds really cool to me. And Richard Garfield standing up and saying I fixed Magic is a pretty big ticket to try to promise everybody. So we'll see exactly how that works out.
I should point out that the aspect of actually playing Magic that I don't like and a lot of people find frustrating is the mana flood. Like getting too many lands or not getting enough lands issues that Magic sometimes has. The way this game solves it is that you choose one each round, you choose one of your 3 colors, and you can play cards from that color, but they're all free.
Wow. Okay, so it's like you're never really building up economy, just you're choosing which of your economies to activate.
Yeah, so you got to look at the board state, look at the contents of your hand, and the first decision you make in a round is like, I'm going to be white. What's my color this round? Then you can only play white card, and that's it. That's all you can play. The stuff that's on the table you can use somewhat, but you can only play fresh white cards. And that ends up making decisions, especially if your hand has a nice mix of stuff in it, you kind of got to make a tough decision based on reading the table state. And that's a good decision right off the bat. And it'll also kind of just completely scare the resource question.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Well, yeah, there's so many things. I feel like we could just do a whole episode on Keyforge just because of how much it is sort of thrown the board game side and the CCG side of the hobby and the LCG, Fantasy Flight LCGs. Like, this is, I would say, maybe one of the biggest announcements for card game play.
What I see them doing, and this is how I think the game will thrive, is I see them having a lot of sealed tournaments where you go to it and you buy a Keyforge deck, and that's your entry fee, and then you go play some number of games with it, and then there's like a small prize for the winner. Sure. I think that FFG will really encourage that kind of play with this. I think that especially at first to get people into it and get them to have a deck in their hand, it's like $10. You get the deck. This is a playable deck in every tournament, and you may get a prize if you play. And I think that's how they will hook people into this. And then later on, there will obviously be like, choose your deck, bring your best deck type. I think at first they'll just do that kind of blind sealed tournament. I think that could be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100% on that, dude. So, Keyforge, you were at the announcement for that on Wednesday, and how did your convention experience start? How did the official convention start for you? Were you there at 10 a.m. when they released the flood?
No, at 10 a.m. the next day, I was playing. My son and I both played in it. We didn't do the best. Let's put it that way. We made a couple bad metagame calls, and I think that's a good way of putting it.
Well, I think, Trent, you've always kind of been the guy to roll into a tournament with a deck that nobody expected to see.
Well, I'm pretty loyal to Crane in this game. That's kind of my faction. My son's pretty loyal to Phoenix. My son has a particular style of Phoenix that he likes to play, which mostly involves like his restricted card that he was allowed to use as charge for anyone that plays it, which might give you an idea of the kind of stuff he was trying to do. My Crane deck was... I shouldn't have played what I played, but we'll get back to that. I went 1-3, and he went a similar record. I don't remember exactly what his was, but it was similar to that.
Yeah. But I mean, this is the type of game, though, that, with having many years, like decades of existence before this newest edition, like this could be pulling like the cream of the crop when it comes to competitive card game players.
There was definitely some very skilled people there. I don't have any doubt about that. There are people that were basically L5R lifers that used to play at the CCG. So, yeah.
So I mean, you're also looking at like, I mean, there's different demographics and different levels of involvement will be attracted to different, these games will attract different sort of groups. And I would say that L5R with the way that you've showed it to me and the positive elements that both you and TC have mentioned, it make me think that this would be the type for people who are, the real high level tournament players. So
I think that TC would probably have had similar results to me based on my conversations with them.
Yeah. So it was one of those like get on your big boy pants moments.
Yeah. Definitely
cool.
There were some skilled players there.
Cool. Well, nice to hear. So I actually was nowhere to be seen when the convention opened because we had like we went to that pinball bar and ended up like, I ended up waking up later because I got my sleep, and it was a great thing for me to do because had I been there right when the convention started, I mean, I missed out on maybe taking the picture of the huge mass of people or whatever that it seems so obligatory at Gen Con. Just Google those. You won't see anything from me. But by getting there about an hour and a half late, I was able to kind of avoid the initial rush of everybody being everywhere, which I learned when I came earlier on a later day just makes it almost impossible to actually single out any of the publishers, designers to talk with because they're so busy. Like that first hour and a half is just absolutely frantic, sell everything, because there's a lot of publishers that hang on to like let's say they've got 200 copies of a game they're trying to sell. I think they did this Newton, which was unfortunately the most elusive game for me at the con, because I really wanted to come home with a copy, but I just couldn't. Yeah, and you didn't get it either. Then you got sunk too.
My wife. Okay, my birthday was during Gen Con, and my wife had decided she was going to hit the dealer hall and get a couple for me. And one of the ones she was definitely targeting was Newton, and she failed to get it.
Yeah.
Completely on 2 different attempts, she failed to get it. She ended up basically turning my birthday into Kinesia Fest because I got both Taj Mahal and Yellow and Yangtze.
Woo! Man, yes. Well, Kinesia Fest is not a bad thing. I think it'll be a nice birthday. You should just have a picture of Reiner Knizia on your birthday cake then.
Pretty much. I mean, my Kinesia collection is probably larger than it should be at this point, I would say.
Yeah. But the thing is, dude, your birthday cake would have to be an I split you choose Reiner Knizia thing. You gotta.
Of course. That's how we slice the cake up. Of course.
And whoever gets the smallest piece, they're the one who scores points for the group.
Yep.
All right, silliness. But yeah, there's a lot of Reiner Knizia stuff going on there. And yeah, so there was that frantic rush at the beginning that sort of, I'm glad I avoided my first day. And then once I learned that was happening, I kind of tried to avoid that from then on. But in my first day, I made it up and down a couple of the rows and found such games as, let's see here. I had, I got to play The Mind, which we talked about, and you'll hear on a future episode a little bit. But I definitely see your criticism, Trent, with that you can just sit there and sort of count in your head. And it is like it's like wait time, the card game, where you're just like, well, do I have the right card? Do I not have the right card? It definitely has that sort of level that you can take it to that Hanabi is at. But I also agree with you, Trent, that it feels like where in Hanabi, there's a clear line in my head between what's cheating and what's not. In The Mind, it's really tough to not count in your head, to not just like sort of break the game by having a sort of rhythm to the group. And I mean, I totally understand, but I do also appreciate it as a social experiment and can see like it being like a lot of fun moments when you flip over your card and then everybody else at the table is like, oh, dude, you didn't wait long enough. Come on. So I got a chance to play The Mind, and I took a picture, and I think I tagged you in it to try to troll as much as I could.
Okay. You didn't need to do that.
No, it was uncalled for. The other game that was at that game studio, I think it was Pandasaurus, was Nyctophobia, and I ended up being very impressed by what I saw as being like this really cool new game system that's very well fleshed out, has asymmetric play, has some variants already thrown into the box, and then uses a new type of gameplay in which you're actually wearing blackout glasses to simulate that you can't see anything because it's night, and you're being sort of chased around by whoever is playing the. There are different types of monsters you can play with. So it seemed pretty cool. There's actually, this is being supported by Target, who's getting their own special edition of the game that is kind of like targeted towards a new, like I'd say a lower bar of entry, kind of more of a mass market type audience. I don't want to say mass market because that has a really negative connotation, but it's just, it's just a simpler version of the game where you've got a vampire. So I suppose you could look at it as a supplemental thing that you could also buy. But from what I understood, like, they weren't trying to sell Target Edition to people who were going to buy the regular edition. It sounds like the Target Edition is more going to be kind of a simplified game. So that was the Pandasaurus booth that I was at. I also got to see Cole Worley and Patrick Leader of Leader Games, and they were on their way to Board Game Geek, but I got a chance to sit down and talk with the artist, Kyle Farron of Root, and I walked away with a T-shirt for Root, and Root sold out very quickly. It was a huge positive response to it. The only thing they had by like the second day was just a bunch of T-shirts and I think a couple of plushies. And I even think they ended up selling out the plushies for the game. But just the amount of artistic integration and the level of involvement that Kyle has had with this project from the beginning, because Leader Games has hired Kyle Farron as the in-house artist, which is a very unique. And what I hope to see, and what Kyle and Leader Games hopes to kind of make an industry standard, to make artist projects from the very beginning, you end up with a much more cohesive artistic vision. And I've not had a chance yet to play Root, but I'll say it was probably one of what I would call the games of the con, where just everybody seemed to be walking out of the copy of it. Everybody was talking about how great they were enjoying the start of it. So it looks like it's going to be a real success. Hopefully this Sunday, Trent, we'll be able to get a couple of games of Root and maybe a couple of games of the Knizia Fest to start. But this is certainly one of the games I'm most excited for that came out at Gen Con. I, of course, had already participated in the Kickstarter, but it was nice to get to see the success that they were having.
Yeah, I saw Root everywhere as well.
Mm-hmm. I got to see a game that we had talked about on the podcast, and one that seeing it in action, like I definitely, I think it won me over, because I got to play a little demo of this game called Gruff, which is a game about billy goats and goat herders fighting each other. And it's got just that sort of bizarre theme that carries on throughout it. It has a ton of replayability where you actually pre-construct decks. You're going to choose 3 goats out of 15 in the box, and then you're going to only choose 8 out of their 15 total cards for each one. So, I mean, like, you could have different builds within the same goat, and then on top of that, you'll add a goat herder to your stuff, and then your opponent will need to do the same thing where they create their deck out of 3 goats, and there's just a lot of variation in this box. You got a simple system of your sort of cards where you have 3 different goats in front of you, and they're sort of attacking directly the ones that are across the table that your opponent will have. So, like, it's like you've got your 3 different, fronts that are in front of you. And it just seemed to me like a really cool and bizarre theme, very well made. They were saying that because these are the 3 resources in the game, they wanted to get a T-shirt made that said mean, fat, and weird, because those are like the 3 things in the game that you use. And then of course the goat herder becomes crazy because the goats are weird. I thought it was a blast. Did you get a chance to try this one with your son?
I unfortunately did not. I actually I walked by the booth once, but he wasn't with me, so
sure.
I did not.
Well, I hope sometime you get to try it. I wonder what you would think, because I really feel like your opinion on this game would probably mean more than mine, because when I played it, I thought this is a really cool system, and I knew it wasn't brand new, but they have had some recent expansions to just continue to put more and more content in one of those like paperback, the sort of smaller box that's made just to hold cards. You can just fill one of those up with so much content, because they do have some newer expansions. But it's definitely more like a your wheelhouse style thing, Trent. It's that sort of combat card game is one that I enjoy, and I would love to play at this level. But it's just not one that I really find myself playing, especially not at public game nights. But Gruff looked really, really cool. Check them out, Studio Woe. And finally, Kingdom Death Monster. This would be like the first my walk along the aisle here. Finishing it up here with Kingdom Death Monster, which there was just a stack of Kingdom Death Monster games. There was display cases. There was all kinds of stuff. And I sort of introduced my buddy Kyle, who was with me at the time, to sort of what the concept of what Kingdom Death was and how it sort of contrasted with the types of games that I generally look to play. but Kingdom Death was selling like crazy. There were so many people walking around with these giant black boxes filled. It cost $350 a box, but there were people dropping this, $350 for this in the Gen Con floor, and then tripling, quadrupling that investment with all the expansions and all the separate miniatures that they had on sale. But they definitely had a lot of display cases. But Kingdom Death was definitely selling like crazy. I'd say the Gen Con crowd is like a pretty perfect fit for Kingdom Death.
I saw a lot of Kingdom Death around too, but not my thing.
Well, my next tweet is actually over your shoulder, Trent. So why don't we go ahead and turn it back over to you? Because we've already talked a little bit about your Legend of the Five Rings tournament, but what else did you do then when you were there with your family? What are some of the other features that you discovered in this experience?
Well, as I mentioned, we spent significant time in the crafting room, which offers basically you can just go in there whenever you want. It was around room 209, somewhere around in there. That's where it was this year. Probably it was been in a similar location every year that I've ever been there with my kids at all. Basically, you went in there, we did some painting, various crafting things. We spent time over in Lucas Oil Stadium, where there's an extensive family fun area that basically costs no tickets at all. You just go in there, they give you free face painting, a bunch of games just sitting out on tables to play. They're mostly kid-oriented, but surprisingly, there were a few that were fine for adults. They had free face masks that you could make, paper mache face masks. They had all the equipment you needed for that over there. I don't know. There were various other activities going on. So we spent some time over there. We made paper mache face masks and let them dry, then painted them. Took them back to the craft room and painted them. Did a lot of. No, I did not.
Aww.
We were doing parent management stuff, making sure a kid can find a bathroom type of thing.
Of course, yeah. Well, and that's something crazy to bring up, dude. Like other conventions that I've attended have much easier access to things like water, food, and bathrooms. So you found that it was a bit of a struggle to make sure those types of things happen and kind of prevented you from really partaking in a lot of the festivities.
Yes. The bathrooms are much easier, pretty prevalent and easily available, I felt. In this convention hall, it felt it was much harder. And whenever you did find one, it felt like it was half out of order and there was a line. So
yeah, it's just so many people in such a small place. But there is, so the locations you were at had much, because they weren't bulging so much with people, there was a much more convenience there.
Yes, bathrooms near the dealer hall were nightmarish.
Yeah. You telling me, man.
Yes.
So, keep going. I think I interrupted you when you were saying that you had made paper mache face masks.
Yeah, I mean, that's the type of stuff we did. We did a lot of like various crafting things. We found a place where you can just paint a free miniature. You sit down, they give you a miniature. They give you paints and paintbrushes and let you paint for an hour, no cost at all, no tickets. It was just kind of sitting out in the middle of the open space on floor 2. And we did that actually twice and painted miniatures. They gave you a brush to keep.
Dude.
And yeah.
It's like give out the stuff, right? Like that's where the $2 tickets that everybody else is playing to pay games they already own, they're paying for that. And you know what? It seems like a noble cause though, because it sounds like something that your kids really enjoyed.
That was a big hit. We played in a number of events, just a mixed bag of stuff. We did an escape room while we were there.
Oh, cool. Was that part of the True Dungeon, or was it part of the...
It was part of True Dungeon. It was run by an escape room group in Urbana-Champaign that is pretty highly regarded. Okay. And so they built a mobile escape room and a side room in a hotel, basically. And it was really well done. I was surprised how well executed it was.
What was the
We're actually in the Arctic. So, like, they made a chunk of the room was in the Arctic with, like, snow and stuff. But then there was also a tent. And you started off part of your group outside the tent and part of you in the tent. And the tent was like locked shut. It had a lock on the door. So you had to figure out how to unlock the lock to get your group together. So you had to pass messages through a clear screen, like a window in the tent.
Nice. So it's like literally legitimately split your group. So one, I'm imagining that you went with one and then your wife, Sarah, went with the other side, right?
Yeah. And then later on, we were in the same group because our kids went in. We wanted to make sure that we were managing the kids. So our whole family was in the tent and everybody else in our group was outside the tent. Because it was like a group of 8 or 9, 10 of us, something like that. And then later on, as we started uncovering stuff, we eventually found a door and it opened up and there was a spaceship in there. And we didn't actually
Ooh.
quite realize that at the start that that was going to occur.
Nice, dude. Well,
That
maybe
was
they're getting at the old ones and the the mountains of madness.
basically what they were going for, but you didn't really
Oh,
realize that
cool.
at first. There was like starting to be little hints of like Lovecraftian stuff, and then we
Mhm.
figured out how to open up the spaceship, and we're like, okay.
Dude, that sounds like taking advantage of the types of things that you can do and telling a story in an escape room is just fantastic. And
It
that
was.
sounds like
It
the
was very well done. I don't remember the name of the group. I'd have to look them up, but they're out of Urbana-Champaign, and they were running escape rooms at Gen Con, and the one we did is really well executed.
Urbana-Champaign,
Um,
Illinois,
yeah. I
where the
don't.
University of Illinois is.
Yep, I don't know what the name of the group was, but if you look at escape rooms at Gen Con, it's run by a group from Champaign. That's the people I highly recommend.
Very
Um,
cool.
we my kids and my wife did a saber fencing thing while I was at a Lord of the Rings co-op event. They
Hmm.
went into a room and did saber, like learned how to fence, basically.
Oh, nice, nice. Did they have
Yeah.
to bring their own foam swords or what?
No, they used actual sabers and they put on all the gear and everything.
Holy crap! Wow.
I mean, there is so much. There's a lot of stuff that's non-gaming related and gaming adjacent going on at Gen Con.
Dude, I had no
It's pretty
idea.
amazing. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff.
Well, very cool. So, yeah, I'll go back here to sharing some of the gaming related things, and we're just gonna keep this rhythm going, Trent. We'll come back to the swords, but first, I'd like to mention the game Raccoon, which is like a commodity speculation game. That's just recently. I think it ran on Kickstarter. It's coming out from oh goodness, I think it's Glenn Drover, maybe who's made this one, and he's the designer of the Age of Empires board game. So this one looked to be a pretty cool, like sort of recipe fulfilling, but the values of different commodities are going to be going up and down, and you're going to be like owning certain amounts of them and hoping to maneuver those quantities to make it so that whatever you have in your possession is worth more when you go to sell it, and you'll get points in some way and in an adjacent way. I'm pretty sure that you have to find a way to sort of fulfill a recipe to get points. But anyway, I didn't get a chance to see that much about it because instead I moved over to the game Railroad Rivals, which had some interesting comparisons I would draw to like the most recent running on Kickstarter game 18 Lilliput. This almost seems to mix like a little bit more Age of Steam with a sort of 18 Lilliput esque, where you're laying out a map and which is creating these adjacencies and create like you're sort of putting different cities on a map where it's all these square cards, and every square card just connects directly to another square card, which would be a different city, and you're looking to make deliveries Age of Steam wise, but it also looks to mix with like the Winsome style games at some Railroad Rivals is the name of the game that I'm talking about. Railroad Rivals, which looks really, really cool, does actually involve stocks, and looks to have a mixture of a Winsome game together with a map that you're laying out one square card at a time to create connections, which then you'll later on be able to deliver. It looks like there might be some role selection in it as well. I was just very impressed at some of the buzzwords that were being said here. It reminded me of some of my favorite styles of game because I really do love that Winsome style of train game. The
I saw it and that was about it.
Sure. The next up is they were advertising the Magic Maze expansion, and I was kind of wondering, like, well, I've never even finished my base copy of Magic Maze, but some of the things that are added in the Magic Maze expansion look to be like there are threats that are coming for you that will actually actively hurt you, which seemed to me to be really interesting to sort of add this extra element of stress where it's not just you racing against the clock. It's like there are literally things that are going to come and they'll be coming for you because it's like the security is on your tail. So that looked really cool. And did you see, Trent, in the Chip Theory Games booth, who's the manufacturer of Too Many Bones, they had this like amazingly wax museum quality statue, probably the highest quality statue I have ever seen of one of the gear. I think they're called like gearlings or gear.
Box. Yep.
And they had
I
one. She was like playing a lyre or something, like some sort of a crazy instrument. It was like, it's just nuts, man. And they were advertising the game Undertow.
Yeah. Okay. So, Too Many Bones is a game my wife and I played there 2 years ago. I really liked it. I picked it up. It's I would say a light RPG that's very heavy on dice rolling. But what's interesting is you have a dice tech tree where you're literally upgrading your dice, and that's how you improve your character. And it's really well done. You can play probably an entire like small campaign of it in a single sitting for like 3 or 4 hours probably. I would say it's that type of length of game. You can play individual sessions pretty quickly and then just save your campaign state. And that's what Too Many Bones is like. Too Many Bones Undertow is basically just a whole, like a standalone additional version of Too Many Bones, basically. More characters to play with. I have different tech trees to explore. Completely new campaign stuff, a bunch of other random stuff going on. And yeah, it's more Too Many Bones. I really like Too Many Bones, but you got to recognize it for what it is. It's meant to be a tabletop role-playing game with some. The battles are fairly strategic and interesting the way they do them. What's really interesting about it is the fact that your dice chucking that you do as part of a role-playing game has a tech tree to it, and you're upgrading your dice. Mm-hmm. And it's done in a really clever way that I really enjoy. So this is just more of that.
Yeah, this one is actually a standalone expansion. So the big thing here is that you've got 2 new gear locks you can play as, and so if you want to buy this as a standalone, you can only play it with either 1 or 2 players. And it sounds like really like who Chip Theory they've captured the attention of solo gamers, and the individual that I got a chance to talk with at the booth was part of the development team, and he said he primarily plays it solo, like most of the Chip Theory games, and that it really has like a nice, like it has a nice amount of replayability. The scenarios are extremely replayable, and that the battle system has even more like instead of it just being a 4x4 grid, apparently now with Undertow, you've got like the shore on one side and then the water on the other side to sort of be places where enemies can spawn, or you can end up in those locations. So it looked to be really cool, and only $85. And you could argue that it's half the content of the normal because you're only, but it is playable on its own at $85 though. Goodness gracious, when you're getting like the straight up poker chips for every single one, that's why that number gets up so high. So
yeah, it is a lot of fun. Our old co-host Jonathan, I think if he ever had a chance to play this, would flip so far over it wouldn't even be funny.
It'd be right up his alley.
I think this screams uphill, yeah. It's pretty good. Yeah, a thing I do like about this is, and this is having the old one and 3 extra characters for it, so I already have 7 characters, is the fact that the characters play so differently. They really do a good job of conveying a very different feeling with different characters because of how their dice are so different, and then they upgrade in different directions. Mm-hmm. They do a really good job with it. That's where the innovation and interesting part of this game is.
Very cool, yeah. And I would say that the intellectual property that they've created seems to be something that people have just fallen in love with, and I totally see why. I mean, it's a really beautiful, and it's like sort of that mixture of fantasy. It's almost like magical realism because you've got it's so well depicted. I mean, and I'm just the statue alone, I was like, holy crap! It's like I wanted to reach out and touch it. It looks so lifelike.
Yeah, the character you saw was a statue of a new character called Stanza, and she's basically a bard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yep, she's got the instrument and everything. So really cool stuff. Seeing that from Chip Theory Games, and I think that it's pushing Gen Con from being just like, hey, here's our game, to more of like, let's create an experience. And I think that it's pushing it more in the realm of what I understand it Essen Game Fair over in Germany is. Moving on to,
I would agree with that.
Moving on to Gamelin Games, they had some of the prototype pieces for their unreleased game and even unkickstarted game, Tiny Epic Mechs. And what they are really doing now is emphasizing the use of the meeples, where you have the little pieces like guns that you can put in the holes for the arms and stuff. You can like equip them. They've got some sort of a licensed name for it, and I forget what it is off the top of my head. But I was actually pretty impressed by the look of the new Tiny Epic Zombies, because it looked like there's going to be a ton of variability. And Trent, I mean, bear with me here. I know that Tiny Epic Zombies might not be like the heaviest game, but if you remember what Pandemic Rising Tide did, where every game you're going to play with a different set of variable objectives, that's what Tiny Epic Zombies looks to do. And it looks to do so by having you, like, your turns are simple. You just say, like, I'm going to move 3 times. And then every time you move, you can do a kind of free or secondary action in the place that you're at, and there's just a lot of really nice pieces in this game, even though they're small. This seems like the type of game that could have come in a box that was like $50. And they're finally to that point now where I'm starting to say, well, this gameplay here is so close to the big $50 boxes that I really see what Tiny Epic is trying to capture, which is a feeling of, like, we could have made this game huge, but we chose to make it small to be, more like eco-friendly, not just eco-friendly. They do kind of mention that, but not to go down that hole, but more just to be more affordable towards people that don't want to have to spend $50 on every single game.
Yeah,
So,
I, I have played almost all of the Tiny Epic games. I liked Galaxies. That was probably the only one I really felt like I would say positively enjoyed. But I like the idea of games which pack a lot of games in a small box. My wife, for example, is a big fan of the Paco Games games, like the size of a pack of gum.
Yeah,
She's just like carrying a handful of them in her purse at any given moment. You can, in fact, ask her the next game day, and she'll probably pull out 4 or 5 of them. And they're surprisingly good, given that they're the size of a pack of gum. I think there's definitely a market for the type of game you can just carry around in your backpack or purse all the time and whip out and have something playable in a 15-minute gap when you're sitting at a table. I think that's really a market, and I think that some people are starting to realize that, and that's a good thing.
Very cool, yeah. I saw there was a lot of sort of large editions of games in the convention, and I would say, I don't want to like throw shade here, but I kind of will, and that's the big game of Santorini. I was not exactly impressed by the quality of the components. It's like cardboard. They're like corrugated cardboard that they use to play Giant Santorini, and I'm like, oh, come on, you gotta make these pieces nicer than that. They were nice like plastic miniatures for the figures, but like all of the building blocks were just cardboard. So, but Santorini still had some extra stuff. Oh, they were doing a promo for Santorini that I ended up picking up from the Dice Tower booth, where I got to meet Suzanne from the Dice Tower podcast. So, and I think that she's just done a fantastic job taking over that. And I was excited to get a chance to meet and connect with her.
They also, did you see this? They had a large version of Onitama.
I did not see that. No.
Yeah, they did. My son and I played that for like 5 minutes while my daughter and we played it basically 2-on-2 for a little bit at that booth. And that was nice. much more nicely done than the Santorini.
Santorini cardboard boxes. Yeah. Like, no, very cool. Clank, if you've ever played Clank, they've got a really slow rolled, like they didn't barely even announce this, but they came out with a Clank Expeditions called Gold and Silk. And I just jokingly am like, hey, Eurogame theme for this game that's sort of like trying to mix together more like, dungeon diving type things into a deck building Ascension style game. But the Gold and Silk are alternatively like one of them I believe in like a goblin's cavern or something I forget exactly which the gold one is, but the silk is all spider web. Like you're in a giant spider's den. And this was a brand new announcement that they had just done. It was like, hey, let's make this board game. And they've had such a huge success with Clank that it's sort of, they've just continued to develop Clank products. And they're looking at making like they've got some digital products that they continue to work with, but they just keep on making more stuff with Clank. And I think that it looked like people were having a really good time. And it was one of the few booths. I've noticed several companies trying to have like a digital presence at Gen Con, try to make it more like a comic, like an E3 thing. And this is one of the few booths where there was pretty consistent like people that were on and off of the iPads that were out there, whereas a lot of companies, it seemed like that was just an area that kind of was collecting dust. They had this large, a lot of companies had like, hey, we do digital things, and I don't think many people were there for that. But
Blizzard had a booth there. Did you see that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, it was not in the dealer hall. It was like in the room adjacent to the dealer hall. Okay. But they had like a giant booth, and they were selling stuff, and they were pushing Hearthstone.
Oh, and that was pretty. I imagine that was probably pretty. I mean, there's a ton of people that play Hearthstone, right? Like that.
Yeah. It looked like pretty busy every time I was anywhere near it. So.
Very cool. Just a couple to round out here. I played I got a copy of the new Deckscape game, and I got a chance to talk with the process of creating artwork and mixing together the game design and artwork that's necessary to happen in these escape room games. It was a really fascinating discussion because it's like, in many games you can outsource artwork and it's just a matter of like, how is it going to be visually represented? In these games, you have to have clear artwork because otherwise many of the puzzles don't even work. So I had a great discussion with that, and very enlightening, because I want to see more of these type of escape room in a box or in a deck of cards style games. And that was from DV Giochi, which is an Italian company. I also found the game Museum Rush and got a chance to play it. And it has a beautiful art, sort of art retro look to it. I was a little bit, I felt like I played through an entire game of it, and it was a very basic style game. If I'm going to play a game that's about like, you know, being in a museum and stealing stuff, I would much rather play Burgle Brothers by Tim Fowers. But the look of the game and the miniatures and the replayability definitely is there. It's just something that I felt like was a little bit lacking in the exactly what I'm looking for gameplay department. So, but there was some cool ways for you to set up the board to be different historical museums. I got a chance to say hi to Chaz Marler, and they had the new Imhotep, which was the Spiel des Jahres nominee from a couple years ago. Imhotep, they had the new expansion, which is just basically going to offer you more different things that you can do as replay to like essentially new double-sided boards that offer more options for you to use instead of the existing boards in the game. And there is a kind of risk-reward type module that you can choose to play. And got a copy of Drop It, which was fantastic, and got a chat with the president, Ted, of Cosmos USA and his work in sort of localizing the game. And you know those exit games, Trent? You've played many of the exit games?
Yes.
He talked about how that was by far the most difficult project for them to localize for the US because of the amount of you know, just like clarity that needs to be there so you can solve the puzzles. And more than anything, when the puzzles relied on specific German words, it was like they had to really think outside of the box and how to adapt some of those for the US market, which is interesting to think that like Inka and Marcus Brand, who, you know, the designers that come out with Exit, design it originally in German. And sometimes they do that with kind of like the sort of word puzzles you'd expect to see in an escape room game. And it's just, it was interesting to hear that. And Drop It definitely was dropped like it was hot because it was out of stock by like, I want to say Friday evening. So anyway, I'm really excited though to come home with a copy of that, and it will be in my wife in her classroom to help practice motor skills. Anyway, Trent, why don't we go ahead and move on back to, so we were talking about fencing. Nobody got hurt, right?
No, they had all their fencing protective gear on, and it was all good. But my general point with all that is there's a lot of non-gaming stuff going on at Gen Con that people don't see. A surprising amount of it is free. You just got to go find it, and that's the trick. Because the flashy part of Gen Con is the dealer hall. That's what attracts people. That's where people go. And it gives this perspective that Gen Con is all about buying, because when people are taking pictures and putting them on Facebook or and Twitter and stuff, all that people ever see is the dealer hall. But there's a lot of other stuff going on. You just have to wander around and find it.
Yep, I'm guilty of that for sure. So the fencing room though, what did like, they didn't come out with any bruises, right? Was there like, are your kids now wanting to buy a full fencing gear setup?
I think my oldest one, and actually my youngest one, I don't know if my middle one was really sold on it, but my oldest and youngest, I think if there was an opportunity for like a fencing club around here, I think they'd be interested. Cool.
So that was something that your wife kind of handled while you were doing something else.
Yeah, I was playing the Lord of the Rings scenario, the Lord of the Rings the card game on, which was interesting because it's a build your own scenario and it can be played in a competitive mode.
Ooh, so how did they have that structured for Gen Con?
There was a copy of the scenario out. You get to build the scenario according to the scenario building rules, or basically it's just got a number of things where you end up being the quest, you end up building the encounter deck, and
you're building
then
this yourself. Like that's like as a player of Lord of the Rings the card game, this stuff like I guess I'm a little bit confused just because I'm not used to seeing build your own scenarios. Is this a new thing that they tried for the first time, or is this something that they do pretty much every year?
No, this is a new thing. This is a completely different thing. I'll say it makes the scenario really replayable. Everybody that played got a copy of it, but then there was just one on the table, I think. And we played it in a group. I played it in a group of 4 people, and we didn't have a whole lot of problem with it, but I think we were gearing it easy when we were making our choices.
Oh, sure.
You can kind of somewhat modulate the difficulty based on what you're choosing. And yeah, I enjoyed it. I was impressed with how it was done. And the thing is, I could see it.
You didn't slap a hill troll in the middle of it?
There were hill trolls in it, but
there were. Okay.
I don't think we ended up with the hill trolls in the encounter deck. I don't remember for sure. But anyway, the point is we smacked it around. It was fun. It's definitely replayable. You can kind of modulate it to the difficulty you want. And I could see how they could use the idea of how you built it as almost part of a meta game. Like you could make it part of the game as like, if you did say a campaign mode, you could have it so that if you set the scenario up being more difficult, it would give you like benefits if you beat it later on. I could see them doing that type of thing, like making how difficult it was important.
Sure.
It was interesting. I thought that was pretty well done.
Yeah.
I also did an Arkham Horror LCG one. That one was more straightforward. It was pretty much just an ordinary scenario. There wasn't anything too special about it. I sat down and played it with one other random guy that was there, and we just like blew through it. But that's because we were kind of cheating, and both of us had experienced decks, which basically means more powerful decks than we should have been playing.
Yeah.
And we both just blew right through it. So
yeah, you knew what you were. You guys were like experts, and you basically made it sort of like easy mode.
No, what I actually mean is like you in the game you get to expend experience points to put in better versions of cards, and we both spent on our deck, and you weren't. So our decks were like better than they should have been to play the scenario. The way Arkham Horror works is you play it in like a campaign mode, and throughout the campaign you earn experience. You spend that experience to upgrade your deck. We both misinterpreted what they had said as for the description of the.
So you play. Okay, I get what you're saying. All right, yeah, I was confused. But so you started with a deck that should not have been as powerful as it was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
gotcha.
it was what it was. That scenario is fun. It's a side quest that you can add in any campaign, which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
So I played in those two. I usually play in those every year. So,
well, I'm glad that you were still able to participate in those, but you had to be very judicious with which events you could actually choose. And so for you, the priority was the L5R tournament and the Lord of the Rings tournament.
Yeah, those were the only events I participated in without family were the Lord of the Rings one and the Arkham Horror one. The L5R one my son played in, and my wife stuff with the other two kids at that time. I played in a Star Wars Destiny tournament with two of my kids, and my wife was off with our other child at that time. Mm-hmm. My oldest son actually did really well at the Destiny tournament. If he had won one more game, he would have, I think, won a box of boosters. He did really well. And the thing is, his deck wasn't as good as it could have been because there was a card that we didn't have that he wanted for it. And it would have made his deck just legitimately strictly better than it was.
Wow.
So I think if we'd had that, he may have just won the thing.
Nice. Yeah, it sounds like he still pulled off pretty well doing without the card he needed. So
Yeah, it was funny. His last game where he was like, it was about half. He's like very near the end of it, and at one point he draws his hand and looks at it, and he goes like, "I'm gonna win the." He throws it. He's like, "I'm gonna win the game." He was just thrilled.
Oh, that's awesome! Yeah, he already knew it was coming. Very cool.
Yeah, he knew that there was nothing the other guy could do about what he was about to do, so that was kind of fun.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. All right, back to the dealer hall report. I had a chat with Ryan Lockett, and I do not know. First of all, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name well, but some of the things that he told me that were really interesting is that Above and Below is like way outselling anything else that he's ever made, and it's like the game that made it possible for him to go full time as a designer. Which I mean, I feel like so happy that he's able to do that. But even he and I like he admitted, he told me that Near and Far compared to Above and Below is like the better game, you know, like in quotation marks. Like it's got the same elements, but it's like sort of developed more towards my liking, and also by what he told me, his liking. But it was a great talk that we had. Once again, seeing Target, the big box department store Target is picking up some of his games that are only going to be released through Target. So I mean, they're becoming a player in this entire gaming market here in the U.S. And I think that you're going to see a lot, like gaming is going to continue to grow when big players like Target are a part of it. The Decemberists, the band The Decemberists, made a music video using what they wanted to be sort of like a classic looking card game. And
I have this.
The Illimat, yes. So I actually talked with the designer, and it's really cool. Like he's sort of looking at what piece he designed a game that, in my opinion, looks to be a like sort of a cribbage or a bridge type game, except it looks to offer the modern sensibilities, like that each game is going to be significantly different, and the strategy of being able to turn the box in the middle. It's called Illimat, and the Illimat itself dictates which rules apply to which cards that are out on the table, and you can twist this to like change the game. It looked really cool, and Keith Baker was very very passionate about this project, and looked like he was looking to cater towards both the group that would include his parents, which is similar to my parents, you know, kind of like people who are open to playing games but don't want to get overwhelmed, and then also include folks like you and I. So you actually picked this one up, Trent?
I have had this for a while. It's not that new of a release. I've had it for a while, and I would say what it does is it's like a lack of a better word, bridge between games like Bridge and more gamer type games. Is exactly what it is. And I would say that it has hard choices in it. A lot of those trick taking games, a lot of times you just like always know what card to play.
I have to follow suit.
It's just obviously follow suit, obviously like this. This, there's occasionally times like that, but almost always it feels like you have a real choice. And those real choices are really tough sometimes. Have you ever played those, sometimes people are just throwing the cards out really fast because it's obvious what to play. And there's other times when they stop and they're having to think for a minute. This is mostly the having to stop and think for a minute choices. He's designed like a trick-taking game where that's all that. I mean, that's really cool.
That's what it sounded like. I'm glad to hear that he's successful in that, because what he was saying to me sounded super, super cool. I just never got a chance to really play an extended game of it. I did get a chance, though, to see the Indianapolis Colts Stadium, the Lucas Oil Stadium.
Yeah, Lucas Oil. That's where all the family fun stuff was.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, so where the family fun stuff, it was just, to me, it was just crazy how much stuff was going on there. There was an entire separate board game library that was specifically to cater towards LGBT and ally type people. And I think that just in general, Gen Con 2018 was absolutely packed with folks that were wearing either a gamer badge to represent that they are gay or lesbian or any of the following, or an ally badge. I just feel like it was super inclusive, and I was very happy to see that sort of moving forward and including more people into the hobby. And I felt like having a separate, this was nice sort of board game area where they had an entire board game library separate. And I didn't realize that this was an option, because honestly, I would rather do that. I think you can just go and pay generics, and you don't have to do the board game library where you have to pay $8 for this, for X amount of hours. You can do it, just piece it out. So it looked really cool that way. And then I got a chance to meet up with the designer of the City of the Big Shoulders, which is due out on Kickstarter pretty soon. And it is Parallel Games, and Ray, who he and I got a chance to after a long day of demoing for him and of walking around the dealer hall for me, we went out and saw a really nice brewery and had some delicious local beers from the Metazoa, I believe, that made it, and it was a very dog-friendly brewery. It's like a cool little gem that was in the Indianapolis area that we got a chance to try out, and that kind of put my Thursday night, my Thursday to an end. So I've kind of gone over what I did on that first day, and Trent, here let's go ahead and turn it back over to you. When you finished your events and stuff, what were some of the other things that is there anything that we haven't talked about, or what's next? I guess
I've kind of covered all the non-gaming stuff we did, more or less. We did do a lot of gaming there too. Just most of the rest of the gaming I did was either demos with my or full games with my family, or occasionally a couple times I had opportunities to demo games by myself in the dealer hall. But most of the rest of the con, that's what we were doing, was actual gaming. It's just we didn't have every day jam-packed nonstop with gaming. There was other stuff we did. It was kind of
very
the point.
Cool. So you guys actually would go back to your hotel, which I believe you were not staying close this time, right? You were.
No, we were down. We were out by the airport, which is about a 10 to 15-minute drive. We'd drive in and park every morning, but we'd get there early enough that we could always park in the Circle Center Mall parking lot, which just means you would go through a walk that you're in Gen Con. So
nice. So it's about the closest you can be to being in a close hotel without actually having one.
Yep.
Very cool. So back to the games here then, because I do have quite a few to run through. There was a large presence by Oink Games. It was not their first year at Gen Con, but just seeing all these different small box games and how they're starting to get more of a presence, how the game market is expanding to include the different schools of design, because there was a lot of activity at this booth. And the small box games, there was new copies of small box games coming out, but Oink Games having a presence was a nice thing to see. The new Rise of Tribes is a civilization game that I actually did not back on Kickstarter, but after seeing the demos of it run, I was almost sad I was very sad that I didn't get a copy myself, because it's using dice, but it does dice to use action selection in a really nifty way. It's not just dice for resolution. And then every player has a deck of an identical deck of civilization upgrades, but you're going to shuffle those decks. And so what comes out when is one of the ways in which this game offers lots of replayability. There's lots of expansions and stuff like that, but I had a chance to talk one-on-one with a designer, and he was like, I wanted to have dice, but I wanted to have dice where players were not just feeling like they were at the mercy of the dice. And I'm kind of paraphrasing what he said, but I really think he's achieved that in this system. It's a cool way of like having actions get better or worse depending on which actions you choose and what dice you roll at the start of your turn and then place there. I want to see what you think about this, Trent. Did you see the board game booster box booth?
Yes, that kind of thing just annoys me. It's basically just like random board games in a box.
It's not a product for me, man. It's not a product for either you or I, because both of us have had to get rid of games we enjoy to keep our collection a certain amount. So yeah, buying a box of random games does not make sense to me. But from a warehousing perspective, a lot of times this was tied to Game Salute, and I know that Game Salute has a lot of negative negative. When I say Game Salute, a lot of gamers associate it with poorly run shipping policies, poorly run Kickstarters, but really like Game Salute has a large amount of designers and publishers that are happy to be working with them. Specifically, Alan Emmerich of Victory Point Games is releasing Nemo's War and distributing through Game Salute, and he's very happy with what's going on with them. But the Board Game Booster Box fulfills this role of being able to sort of, they'll need space, right? And they'll end up a lot of times warehousing games for a company, and they're just like sitting there. And so, people need to essentially keep on buying these games. And so this is one way for them to sort of get rid of their old inventory, and they're taking a huge loss on it, but you're not able to choose which game. So obviously not a product for me, not a product for you, Trent, but maybe there are folks out there who will be happy with some of the games that they'll get. Speaking of Nemo's War, it looked fantastic,
it's not my
dude.
thing. It's that board game booster stuff is not my thing.
No, and it was strange. I was like, man, so apparently it's much more popular at conventions because, it's just right there, and they get like open their boxes and then just leave their boxes on top of leave their empty board game booster boxes on top of the trash cans around it. So it's like almost like free advertising for them, which kind of made me smile to think about that. But there are some games like from Victory Point Games that have beautiful production that are like labor of love level games that are being put out by game companies that are associated with Game Salute and very happy with the services they provide. So just to say, as a counterbalance to a lot of things that you might hear, there is definitely a lot of people that still have confidence in that. But I have very little confidence in the next game I'm talking about, which is the Dude game from North Star Games. Did you see this one, Trent?
Which one again?
It's called Dude.
No, I think I would have skipped the game called Dude.
Yeah, the game is called Dude, and it has 6 different cards that are different ways of saying dude, and you're basically shuffling a deck that has 2 copies of each. You flip a card and start saying dude the way that you've seen it on your card, and you're trying to find somebody else who still has that same card on top of their deck, and you can keep going through, but it's just like, to me, I cannot imagine demoing this game. I think they, that by itself should have earned somebody like just a badge or, something special or early retirement, because like just listening to people say dude in your face, like for hours and hours on end, to me, like I didn't want to do it even once, and these people had to do it for a long time. But they have a picture of what looks to be a Jeff Bridges knockoff on the copy on the front of the box, and I said, in a way that they took very well, but I think that this game is more Ashton Kutcher from Dude Where's My Car than it is the dude from the Big Lebowski. So I think Dude from Big Lebowski is too cool for this game. My next up game is one that I've reviewed, so I won't focus on it much. I saw some stuff from Super Meeple that really made me excited to see that classic Euro-style games are getting well-produced in the United States, and I'm, of course, speaking about Amun-Re, the card game. Check out my most latest Salin Coefficient video review to find out more about that. Moving on, there's legacy games here, and we see a release of a legacy game by Ink and Marcus Brand, the German designers, the Village People, as some people might know them. But they've got this game called Rise of Queensdale, which you actually use a royal plunger, which is it's literally like a plunger because you fix to the board. When you the plunger sits there and then you sort of use it to draw circles. That's a compass, right, Trent?
Yes.
That draws circles. Well, this looks to be drawing circles like that, so you can. It's called Treasure Island, and you're looking to find out the location of treasure based on what you're seeing there. The next game, and the most difficult game to really track down, they had a copy of it at the Cool Mini or Not that they were demoing, but I'm of course talking about Newton, which is from the design team behind Grand Austria Hotel. It is Simone Luciani, and I'm probably saying that wrong. But Newton looks to have two separate boards, one that you travel around, think like Marco Polo, and then one that you travel up and down as a technology track. And these are going to be variable. The technology track is variable each game. The cards that you'll be playing that are personalities, if you ever seen Lorenzo El Magnifico, the way that they have the great personalities, this one has like scientists. And the idea behind it just looks so cool. I like the sound of the changes, because in Lorenzo, I enjoyed those cards, but they didn't have that much of an impact. By the time you finally played them, many times the game was already decided, and the card didn't have the impact you were wanting because it took you too long to get out. These ones have a more fixed way of coming into the game, these genius cards, and the rest of the game just looks to be beautiful. That's the game. Newton has a nice little picture of an apple on the box, and the apple is also the first player marker. Did you get a chance, though, to actually sit down and see Newton being played anywhere, Trent, or anything?
I saw Newton at the demo booth, but I didn't actually get to sit down with it.
Okay. So the next game I would like to talk about is more along the lines of storytelling games. It's called Holding On: The Troubled Life of Billy Kerr. And this is where you play a crisis team that's responding to a gentleman who has who's entered the last phase of his life. He's going to be passing away. Essentially, you're playing a hospice care team, and you have to manage each other's psychological and work schedule, psychological state and work schedule, while also trying to uncover events that sort of illustrate the past of this man. Very cool things from Hub Games. It's called Holding On: The Troubled Life of Billy Kerr. What do you think, Trent, about being a crisis team responding to a man who, he's not going to get better? What do you think about that? Is that the type of game that will attract you?
I think it's an interesting theme. I give them full credit for trying new themes. Mm-hmm. That's about the best I can say. I'm willing to give games that do an unusual theme more of a shot. So this one I would definitely give a shot to, but the gameplay, I'm not sure if I'd pick it up.
Sure. Yeah, it depends. I mean, it's a cooperative game, and it does involve you managing it's almost like you play the overarching, like you're the manager of this crisis intervention team. And so you have to sometimes hire extra contractors to help your team so that your team doesn't get fatigued and end up having to stay home, because that's a big part of it. It is very exhausting, to work in these worlds. And I think that they've tried to capture that throughout the course of the game. So like you're saying, it's a very brave. I'm glad that they're handling it. I want to see more of how it actually plays. I just didn't get a chance to go too in depth. But that's Holding On: The Troubled Life of Billy Kerr. Moving on to another bold and interesting theme, and this one to me just, around the board, it reminds me most of Psychonauts, and that is from the designer of Stuffed Fables, Jerry Hawthorne. Hawthorne, that's it. Okay, Jerry Hawthorne, and I got a chance to speak directly with Jerry, and it was just fascinating because the level of, he's creating a story and a game at the same time. What he's doing is almost unheard of in board games. Very much more used to seeing it in video games, where he's actually focused on how he's going to pace the experience. And Trent, you've had success with Stuffed Fables with your family, correct?
Yes, we played through most of it as a family. Mostly just me and my 3 kids. I am very impressed with it as a game that I would say aims really well at about 7 or 8 to 10-year-olds probably. I'd say my oldest is probably a little bit out of the upper end of the age range, just a little, but he's still enjoying it. I think is the fact that it's like a family thing, I'd say it's really striking home, especially with my middle one, and really especially with my youngest.
How would you compare it to Mice and Mystics in terms of
it's less complex? I think that my issue with Mice and Mystics is I felt like the theme and story it was telling was aiming for a younger audience than the mechanics of the game.
Oh, so you think Stuffed Fables is more
yes.
It's hitting its audience?
Yes. I was my biggest issue with Mice and Mystics is I felt like when we were playing it, the story was more fun for my kids and the gameplay was more fun for me. And the gameplay was too complex for them at the time, and the story was really clicking with them.
So you kind of had to almost just you had to sort of you had to take control of the game at times because it was too much for them to be able to
Yes.
grok all that they. Okay, I get exactly what you're saying because and I'll talk about my experience later, but I played with a young child and I played a game and had to sort of, like give them their options. And then when they didn't decide, have to just choose something. So,
Mm-hmm.
but the reason that my discussion with Jerry Hawthorne was even more he might come as a guest on the podcast. He was very the questions I asked him, he seemed very passionate and ready to share, and things I've never heard heard him say anywhere else. And this, the main topic of our discussion was the upcoming game Comanauts, which is kind of like Psychonauts, I think. And but the level of really developing. It's like Inception meets like stuff Fables, but I don't want to say it's so crazy, man. It's like you're talking about dealing with serious themes, like that this guy is a savant and who's made this dark energy machine that's supposed to create dark energy that keeps the world going without like a renewable energy source, and he ends up going into a coma, and this machine's going to blow up the world if the team that's sort of going into his head Inception style, can't like fix his problems and get him to come back and help save the world. So you're dealing with all of the baggage, all of his emotional baggage, which is divided into 11 different sort of. It's just absolutely fascinating. I think it's really cool that he's taken what I thought was a very cool system and stuff, Fables, and I really enjoyed it. But I kind of felt like, Trent, I don't have young kids, and I felt kind of weird like wanting to continue to I never acquired it because it's just it seems like it's more to play with kids, and I don't see myself as having the opportunity to play with younger kids. But Comanauts really look cool to me.
Yeah, I saw it very briefly, and it did look interesting. And while I was at that booth, I also watched the much shorter Crossroads game. And yeah, I don't think I'll be playing it.
Oh, not so the one that'll be the next one from Dead of Winter. Is this one set in space, right?
Yes, it's the one that was supposed to be Dead of Winter in space, but it sounds like it's cut down to like a 45-minute game. And when I watched it played, it didn't really strike me at all. So I was like, bye. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get what you're. So, I didn't get a chance to look at that one. So but it sounds like it's going to be a much shorter. So maybe a whole different audience than Dead of Winter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, my next one, Trent, I'm sure that I did it partially for you, partially for me, because we're both huge fans of this. The Tasty Minstrel Games booth had a small area where the Mo Ideas design team was there, and not just the design team, I should say, the publishing team, and they were selling their newest game, which is a much more pure Euro game, Symphony No. 9. Now, there was very limited copies of Symphony No. 9, but from the look of it, it looks really, really cool. You've got you're working through it reminded me of the Gallerist in a way, but a much simpler, cleaner Euro design than the Gallerist, which is of course Vital Lacerda, and so it's going to have wheels within wheels. This one seemed like a much more easy to understand. But you've got different pieces that are going to be worth different values. The different concerts and whatnot will be worth different values based on the current reputation of an artist, and they can actually pass away. And when they pass away, they will obviously not make any more new pieces, but they will have a certain value. Like when Beethoven passes away, he has like the highest value ever had in his life, which would make sense. So Symphony No. 9 looks really, really cool. Apparently, the original theme of the game was like YouTubers, which I think they made the right choice in doing a more classic style theme to go along with a classic style Euro gameplay. They also had Tulip Bubble and Liberatores, which, Trent, this is the one that I really want to hopefully interest you in, because I have a copy of it that I really want to play, and he described it as like a heavy social deduction game. And what I mean by that is mix together the sort of flow of history style card drafting line through the ages, light card drafting line, and mix that together with having your hidden identities, kind of like Shadows over Camelot. And it looked to me to be really fantastic. I've started reading the rule book on it. It just looks really cool. You've got you have to balance who's going to end up winning. If it's going to be the Caesar team, which has like your traitor, but everybody has to sort of get money from Caesar, even if you don't want him to continue to be in power, because you are the Liberatores, the people that assassinated Caesar for the good of the Roman Empire. Whether or not that was the right thing to do. So Liberatores, new like heavy social deduction game, and he almost didn't want to say social deduction because he doesn't want to use that phrase because it's got such a negative connotation with people like Andy, from our podcast. But it looks really, really cool, and I hope to get this one played with you. They're also selling Tulip Bubble and Mini Rails, and yeah, like it just, to me, the fantastic design stuff coming out of Mo Ideas. I was so happy to see them have a presence at Gen Con.
Yeah, they had a very, very, very small presence last year, which is when I got Tulip Bubble. So
very cool.
Yeah.
So Tasty Minstrel Games, speaking of them, they are releasing the Ludologies podcast, Trade on the Tigris, which is their trading in the Mediterranean theme game. And it's supposed to be trading in the Mediterranean, but kind of like real-time aspects. And it was getting a really positive response when I was there. Also picked up Jungle Ola by the Hisashi Hayashi, which is their smaller box game that they were doing. So that was other stuff going up to Tasty Minstrel. Catan Studio is coming out with a Catan Histories Rise of the Incas, which actually is looking at how the Incas came to be from other smaller, lesser-known tribes. And so you play as the smaller, lesser-known tribes, but what's interesting here is it almost mixes Catan with Small World, because you will actually go into decline. When you go into decline, all of your cities and towns will then be covered up by like this sort of a green plastic overgrowth token, and then now those can be built on by other players or by yourself again, I believe. So, but you'll need to start a civilization again. It sort of like mimics the sort of the rise and fall of many different smaller groups and civilizations that happened in the precursor to the natives. So, that was the last thing I did on. I believe we're on to Friday now, and I'm moving along at a good clip here, but. I did get a chance to try All Direct Entertainment's Space Base, which is like Machi Koro in space. It was definitely a lighter game that went on too long for what it was with 5 players, but I do feel like that just somewhat had to do with it. We were all learning it, and there was kind of some uncertainty. But you know, if you like Machi Koro and you want it set in space, this one's definitely a step up from Machi Koro. And that's what it offers. Like I said, one that the entire group had to make new rules to make sure the game ended on time. But that was Space Base. And now moving into one that I want to hear Trent's reaction, because he's talked many times about wanting to see me play a game. And Kyle, the friend that I went to Gen Con with, is a huge fan of what he calls storytelling games. And one of the biggest and kind of the poster child for this is the Fiasco game. And here's what I think is great about storytelling games. They are just as open to new players being able to pick them up, play them, and then be done with them as like board games are. You know, it's not like you have to join a campaign and go through all of the campaign. It's just you are basically playing like what feels like an improv storytelling type experience, and there's all sorts of different experiences you can have. But Fiasco, which is the one that I have now played, is essentially like inspired by Blood Simple, Fargo, the types of murder mystery, sort of, you know, like where everything went pear-shaped for the bad guys. And you're the bad guys, you play as the bad guys, and you actually do role play scenes as the characters that you know, like just the level of I want to say just improvisation that the game sort of facilitated. I mean, it's been said that our kids these days are not creative anymore. They don't know what to do. They're caught up, and they don't know how to respond when you say, here's, you know, write a paragraph, write a story, and they don't know what to do. Well, games like Fiasco give you a framework to work within and give you a goal and give you different relationships. And you do these together as a group. You choose your relationships as a group, though you will be, of course, acting out as your character throughout the scenes that play out in the game. But you're able to just, there's so much open-endedness, but then you have something to actually go off of and be inspired by. So I really enjoyed creating Martian McFlux, who was in a doomed space station. And it was supposed to combine like time travel, which we were going to do a time travel type thing together with the idea that so time travel like Marty McFly, but then we were out in space, so Marty McFlux. But I had a really great time trying that. Trent, you've played Fiasco. Is this one that you keep coming back to?
Absolutely. I'll play Fiasco anytime, anywhere, anything. I have 3 books of nothing but scenarios for it. I really like Fiasco. But I like this genre just like your friend does. I like the like 2 to 4 hour storytelling games just sit down at a table. Very rules light, just enough to guide you collectively telling a story, and that's about it. And Fiasco does it really well. There's a lot of them that do it really well, depending on what you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Like he'd played games like Gen Con is the perfect place to go if you're looking for these types of storytelling games. There's just like a room where you just kind of sign up and they put you in one. I don't even think you get to choose necessarily which one you're doing. It's just that you sign up because you want to do storytelling games. And I think that's really cool. That's, you know, that sort of openness where it's like you're coming here. It's almost like a game night structure, you know, a quiet year. And this game was all like you were not supposed to like talk about the game outside of the game. It was all supposed to be sort of handled like kind of a one player will decide something and then everybody else kind of has to go with it. And it was a much less, there was less emphasis on like death and destruction and dying. And it was much more of an emphasis on like, how are we going to make this civilization that we sort of conceived of that's living just below the Arctic, the polar Arctic circle. How are we going to make this work? What resources are going to be in scarcity and which ones are going to be in abundance? What other players are going to be around? They created a map as they were playing. They actually like drew the map, and yep. he got to stay with it. Have you tried that one yet?
Yes, that one's fantastic. That's one of my favorites.
It's really cool, yeah. And I think they use a deck of cards that sort of just gives you random things to have to react to. But that's it's a deck of cards that has like, okay, well, you have 2 different questions that you can answer with this. So
yeah, I could go on and on with these types of games. There's a lot of them that I like.
Well, and I think sometime we should maybe do an episode on storytelling games. I know that having Kyle, my friend, on, I've already talked with him about having him on the long view to talk about Fiasco, just Fiasco itself. But like these storytelling games, like they have the creative part of my brain. I was able to just totally tap into that. And I feel like anytime a board game tries to do that, it always is within the confines of a board game system, and it just never really has real storytelling. You feel that way too, Trent?
Yeah, the storytelling games take off and the mechanics get out of the way of it.
Exactly. Yes.
Right, do that. So.
And I had talks with Kyle about how like he doesn't know how to like he wants to have storytelling game night, but then like he doesn't know how to like brand it as that so that he doesn't just get people that show up with like categories and want to play like classic games, because it's like when I say game night, people will show up and they won't be they won't feel like they'll see my games, be like, oh, I've never played that, but they're still board games, right? If he says this is a game night and he tries to get you to play like Fiasco, a lot of players are going to be like, I thought this was going to be board games or tabletop games or strategy games. So, but they're like, to me, like the experience that you have in these games is like, there's so many stories for you to tell coming out of it. And to me, this is really the direction I'd like to head with exploring. Like, I love my RPG group, and I definitely like Josh is a fantastic dungeon master, and it's because of his attitude that it gets to the point where these storytelling games are trying to exist in the first place. Like Josh is an excellent DM. That's why he's able to make the story come through, even though a lot of the game is like dice rolling and modifiers and, elements that the game has a structure you have to fit within. Storytelling games just totally shed that. And it's just the interactions. And I like that in Fiasco, the only thing that you do is you choose if you're gonna be the one who sets up the scene, or if you're gonna decide whether or not the scene is a success or fail. So if you choose to set up your own scene, it's somebody else in the group that's going to actually decide whether or not you succeed or fail with whatever your sort of initiative is in your scene. And this is represented by different colors of dice. And the different colors of dice, you don't even roll the dice after you've done the setup at the beginning of the game. I like the way that the setup uses dice to determine to have players collectively determine relationships and setting and objects, and then it uses the colors of those dice, which are in equal proportions, to determine whether there's successes or fails. It's all a very clean and what seems like a fair system. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm completely agree.
Very cool. Barrage of other games here that we talked about that I saw. Patchwork Express, which I did not see an extended thing, but it just looked like a smaller version of Patchwork with less turns. Gingerbread House is like Baron Park or Patchwork. If you could stack up, you only have a 3x3 grid, so you'll be building up and trying to get certain recipes to fulfill cards in the middle of the game. It looked really cool. Like it's got a much more vertical element to any of the other tile drafting, tile laying games I've seen. The Mind Clash games, there was a production copy, I believe, of Cerebri, which looked really, really cool. But I was more interested in discussing with Victor Peter, the president and CEO of Mind Clash games. They're coming out with a new scenario-based game that looks to sort of mix together the worlds that they've imagined and dinosaurs into like a Robinson Crusoe, Adventures on the Cursed Island type survival Dinosaur Island experience. So mixing dinosaurs in with Robinson Crusoe seems really, really interesting. And, like anything that these guys would come out with would be on my radar, just because I've loved what they come out with in terms of Tricarion and Anachrony, and now Cerebria is really interesting. But anyway, that's Perseverance, Castaway Chronicles that they were teasing. And this is a game that won't even be released. They're currently saying Q3 of 2019, I believe. So we're talking a full year from right now that it'll finally be available, and that is from Mind Clash Games. Did you see anything about that, Trent?
Yeah, I looked at it when they were starting to demo it last year, and it didn't strike me. I'm a huge fan of Tricurion, but the other I didn't like Anachrony as well.
Yeah,
And
I'm
I think
actually
this
kind of in
is
that camp as well.
yeah. I think this is probably going to be more Anachrony than Tricurion, but I don't really. I mean, I don't know. I want to actually play it, but I think
Here's
I
what I would
want to play
say,
it enough
Trent.
to buy it.
So Tricerion was designed by Victor Peter, who's the guy that I talked to. Anachrony was designed by David Turksey, great designer, one that works a lot with Mind Clash. But this is actually not designed just by him. I believe this one's going to be the same team that did Tricerion is actually putting out this one. So the designers of Tricerion will be the ones that are making this one. So hopefully, I mean, obviously, right now it's just all it is just whispers and rumors, but it looked really cool. They had that sort of like a teaser poster game. And also, he happened to be the voice of Michelangelo in the cartoon in the 90s, the 1990s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And so he was kind of like that sort of Comic-Con type personality. So Big G Creative was sort of adding that Comic-Con flair to Gen Con. And I ended up like, the Brady Bunch party game that I got, like this team or that team, it depends on what cards you've played and what cards you've played in relation to other players. So you're kind of never sure which side you're on necessarily, but it still has that, like at the end of the game, one person's going to be accused. And if that person who's been accused is correctly the troublemaker, then the good guys, quote unquote, good guys win. And so it actually is a Brady Bunch party game that is beautiful 70s artwork. And it's like one of the first times that I've looked at the artwork in the game and felt like, man, the pictures that they used and the art style they've chosen looks really great. I know it sounds like I'm talking a whole ton about a game that's like, like what the heck? This is a throwaway mass market game. But no, guys, there is actually like a designer listed on the box, Prospero Hall. And I was really impressed with it. And also the guy who played Michelangelo just was a hilarious individual to talk to. It was clear that he was, learning a lot about board games for the first time. And anyway, just a fun time at that Big G Creative booth. In a weird positivity that I felt towards this Brady Bunch party game, even after I've now played it once. So Capstone Games has their Estates. The Estates was in I believe the final production run, and it just looks beautiful. I got a chance to play the game that is based on Neue Heimat with Carmen from Game Surplus, and I loved my play at this. Have you ever had a chance to play Neue Heimat, Trent?
Nope.
Dude, it's so cool. Like the Estates, when it comes out, it's a fantastic system. It feels almost like it could have been designed by Knizia. It's that like clean and good. I was interested that they chose to release this, which I consider an economic game, under the Simply Complex label. But after talking a bit with oh man, I've got his face in my head right now, but I can't remember his name. Was it Tim? I think it was Tim. After talking with him, it's like the Estates teaches in 5 minutes, and that's why they've chosen to brand it as Simply Complex and not Capstone Games. But I'm excited to see it. It looked beautiful. The new version looks beautiful and looks like it's going to be much more available because this is the type of game that I think deserves that wide release. You get a chance to stop by the Capstone booth at all?
Carthago and ended up buying a copy.
Oh, you bought a copy of Carthago. Uh-huh.
Yes, I played through it at their booth, and I ended up quite liking it more than I was expecting to. And I bought it, and my wife and I have played it twice since. It's a solid. It's one of those games. It's about 45 minutes, but packs in a lot of decisions in those 45 minutes. I think my older children could have played it. My kids, some of my kids sat down to actually demo it, and I felt like my oldest kid was following the demo and was able to play it just fine. My youngest one was not. So my wife took him and went elsewhere. It's a solid little economic game with some different. I don't know. Economics probably not kind of the right word. I don't really know if that's the right way to put it. It's a solid game that's not like going to dominate your game night. I would call it almost super filler, but it's got a lot of good decisions in it for what it is. And the size of the box is nice, fairly small box. I liked it. Some people were saying that they felt like you can get into certain grooves with it, and like there's only a certain number of ways to win. I don't think I agree with that. I think it's a lot more dynamic depending on what cards are coming out. I think that you can have kind of a strategy with it, but you don't necessarily have to. And I liked it, and enough to pick it up. The fact that it was like 25% off and came with some promos probably helped. But
yeah, for sure. those makes it easier to buy things. I was actually pretty impressed at how a lot of publishers were not just charging MSRP. There were some discounts that a lot were offering, which I saw that at WBC with GMT, all of their games were being offered for a discounted price. And I think that, giving a little bit of a discount to people just makes it so that you come home with a bigger box of games and they sell more of their games. And then those games get out there and then more people want to go online and buy them or go to their local game store and buy them. So it was a really cool, it was nice to see publishers offering some discounts there. So moving on, I did see the Munchkin collectible card game have a sign, but there was hardly anybody playing it. I'm sure that, there was some competitive play in the organized play area. But yeah, unfortunately for TC, there was not a huge presence, and it just seemed like there was just an awkward vibe at the Munchman at the Steve Jobs, their likeness. And whereas if you're just doing a comic book art style, which I learned that the original Legendary Encounters was all original art, which really impressed me because I think it's very cohesive and I really like the art. And then Firefly had that sort of weird inconsistencies. But so aside from the X-Files game coming out, which is somehow going to fit 200 episodes plus of the X-Files into one game. They also had a lot of iPads that unfortunately weren't seeing a ton of use, but it's because they're coming out with a legendary system that does not use an intellectual property. So their own separate original IP to play Legendary on your mobile devices and whatnot. So if you're interested in Legendary for the gameplay, go ahead and check that out. That'll be online. There's a game from Cryptozoic called Pantone. Did you see this one, Trent?
I saw the box, but I didn't really follow anything about it.
So the cards are it's almost like paint samples. If you go to the hardware store and there's paint samples, there's 15 different colors of paint samples, and you're going to be using these to try to convey abstract concepts. So think like the game Concept, except you're using paint sample cards and laying them on top of each other, and the game sort of makes itself harder as it goes on for you to be able to convey things. And it's I think it's one player is the clue giver, and then the rest of the team, the other players are trying to guess it. I don't remember if it's fully cooperative or not, but it looked really cool, and my wife was very interested in it. I'm hoping to be able to pick up a copy of that. So Pantone, a pottery game where you're communicating using essentially paint strip samples. I got to see the actual miniature, which is the gigantic Cthulhu miniature that's the size of, I mean, it is it's the size of a statue. It's the size of a Buddha that you see at maybe a Chinese restaurant. It's huge. You can actually play the game on the base of this statue, but they had a huge painted version of the Cthulhu statue from the most recent Kickstarter Death May Die campaign. It was just crazy to see that. They're also coming out with a game called Narcos, which looked like it was a lot about sort of pick up and deliver. What do you know? But it is licensed by I believe they had a license to the I'm still not in the camp of I'm prepared to spend $150 for something to carry things around when, totes and whatnot. We had our discussion about board game bags. And I think that we talked about how there are benefits to different ways that you can carry in games, and just being able to carry a ton of games, especially when they're hidden from other people's sight, can not necessarily be the ideal setup. Next up is I would say the single game, if I was going to award the game of Gen Con for the one that just captivated my I really want to try this game. I really want to play it. It's I'd say the game that I'm most hyped about, and that is Yellow and Yangtze, which I know, Trent, you a copy of as well.
Yeah, it was a birthday gift from my wife because it was Kinesia Day. It's basically Tigris and Euphrates rebooted. Instead of square tiles, you have hex tiles, and there's 5 different colors instead of 4. There's a few other rules changes. The best one I liked was they directly alleviated the thing I disliked the most about Tigris and Euphrates, is the fact that you basically had a blind draw on the green tiles, and now there's a row of them instead. So you can smooth out what you get, and you have a lot more control over what you get. Now, perfect control, because that would honestly be kind of boring, but yeah. I mean, some control, better than none. And so I'm just all over this. I think strict improvements. So
it is a strict improvement. I mean, but even if you do get exactly the tile you want, it's now coming at the cost of everybody knows what you wanted.
Yeah, that changes the game. That makes it a different game, and I like it.
And yeah, also, Trent, this sounded like it was specifically for you. Other players can join into conflicts. Any player at the table can join into a conflict. So if you see something that is just horrible that's going to happen, that's going to hurt you, and you have no control over the outcome of it in Tigris and Euphrates, now in Yellow and Yangtze, you are able to participate in any of the battles. You know, you put forth your tiles just like anybody else. And the coolest thing to me was that leaders, when your leader gets kicked out or when your leader is off the board, like you have to have your leader on the board to really score points to win the game. But when your leader's off the board, now he's actually doing something for you, which to me that just such a beautiful system. So that was my experience with Yell and Yangtze Grail Games. David was just such a fantastic individual to meet with. Also Steve, who was originally going to be who did the Longview. But I had a great time meeting him and his wife, and it was just a really fantastic time meeting individuals that had a very like mind. You know, David's passion and excitement for Yellow and Yangtze and his passion and excitement for his favorite designer, Reiner Knizia. I mean, it's to me, it was very, it was inspiring to see him. And got to talk about how the Australian board game market is very difficult to navigate because it's so remote and so like everything is a plane flight. And so he covers games and sells games really to the U.S. market because the Australian market is just tough to predict. So I thought that was very interesting as well, that Australian distribution, even though he's in Australia, is something that's just so difficult to make happen. He doesn't even really see that being feasible in his business model. I ran up to the CGE room, which is similar to the Rio Grande room. And CGE, it warms my heart to see how much larger their presence is getting, how their games are. They're doing a remake this year of Pictomania with a much smaller box. I'm sure there's going to be some controversy to people who feel like, oh, well, I don't need to own this one. I think that it is an improvement gameplay-wise. It has consumable paper in it, so you're actually drawing with pencils onto paper. And so I'm sure there are going to be people who are like, oh, well, I prefer my dry erase markers. But honestly, like, let's all call a spade here. It was cool that the original Pictomania was what had as much as it did, but it was just way overproduced, and it was a $40 game when it should have been a $20 game. CGE has now made it a $20 game, and they've made it so they've reduced the components that is necessary, and they've also improved the gameplay in doing it. I don't know how they do this. They did it with Tash Kalar, where they reduced the price and still keep coming out with it. The new Pictomania, I've picked it up, and it's very, very cool. Already got a chance to play it several times, and it is definitely an improvement over the gameplay of the original, whether or not you want to invest in this new one. I was flattered. I guess I tooted my own horn a little bit and said, hey, I've completed all the challenges for the Through the Ages app. And they said, like, they were like, well, if you make YouTube videos, you want to do a strategy video. And so I'm like, I'm really intimidated by the one because I'm not nearly as good a player as there is out there. I'm just small potatoes. I can beat the AI. That's about all I can do.
Games you haven't mentioned from the dealer hall, but I can get to them, see whether or not you touch on them yet, and then I'll cover them at the end.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah, I can just keep on going. I went up to Rio Grande Games. I got a chance to play Rattlebones, which was like the first dice building game. And it really, Dice Forge is the game that I would choose for Dice Builder. But it really did, it was largely at the mercy of whatever you rolled. And so it was not a game that I took seriously, but it was still quite enjoyable. Cardhalla ended up, Cardhalla, while it was being destroyed, people were like folding $1 bills into paper airplanes. Cardhalla, if you're not familiar with Gen Con, it is essentially they take all of the throwaway magic cards, like all of the basic lands, and then they make them into, and they do this for all the different CCGs, like basic lands or whatever's their equivalent, and they make them into different constructions that are like architectural and engineering feats of card house creation, and then they let people throw dollars at it to try to knock it down, to sort of raise money for charity as the convention's coming to a close. My next experiences here, and I am getting towards the end, got a chance to try and I'm sure that's not just here in the Midwest, but I got a chance to treat them to some local stuff, even though I'm not an Indianapolis local. But I think it's got less of a pre-constructed element to it. It's more of just like a battle con type system, but it uses like a Yahtzee system like you've got this player mat that has like all these different moves and different combination of dice that you need to roll. And then every player has unique dice, but they do tend to have similar values and similar construction. Like it'll usually be like 3 basic attack faces on every die, 2 defense ones, and then 1 sort of like explode, huge, good stuff. Like your 6. And I feel like that's a pretty standard, at least the 2 that I saw playing against each other. I played a full game of it. It was a really cool thing to be able to see. It's a very high production value. And I picked up the red-green card to Steampunk Rally. So Roxley Games delivering some really interesting products, some very beautiful artwork, and they had copies of Brass Birmingham and Brass Lancashire, which when I came home, I still have my unopened cardboard boxes that have all that stuff because there's just too much. There's just too many things going on right now. Did you get a chance to see the Roxley Games booth at all, Trent?
No, I never actually got to see anything Roxley was doing.
I mean, it was pretty like, if you've been following on Kickstarter and stuff, it was kind of the same stuff, you know, that we would have already done and been aware of. But they did have like an individual who was dressed up as one of the people in, you know, one of the Dice Throne fighters, I should say, you know, like wearing like a full-on cosplay outfit. So that was very cool looking. I checked out from Bezier Games. I checked out Ultimate Werewolf Legacy, which actually uses like a leather-bound sort of book that's just, you play through the entire book. It does have a moderator, and the whole thing is like, you know, from game to game, there's a ton of stuff. And this book itself is part of a recharge pack if you wanted to replay your legacy system. So it's got, you know, it's like that legacy system like Charterstone where you can buy the recharge pack. And in this case, it's this big old diary. Did you get a chance to check out anything from Bezier?
Again, no. It was a booth I just completely missed.
Ted Alspach bought Yellow and Yangtze when I was there. So, I mean, that's sort of like the, you know, designer, this is the type of game that designers play, Yellow and Yangtze from Reiner Knizia. And I talked a little bit, there is a new expansion to Whistle Stop that uses, it like essentially puts the Rocky Mountains in the middle of the board. Did you see that? Anything about that?
I saw it sitting out, but I was like running by it and I just like, oh, look, there's an expansion for Whistle Stop, and kept running.
There was just a lot of things released at this year's Gen Con for like, you know, heavier gamers and whatnot. I was very impressed by that. They've got a new game that's coming out. I think it'll be on Kickstarter soon, or maybe it just was on Kickstarter, One Night Ultimate Supervillains, which I look forward to picking up for my kids, because one of the main things that they've been pushing for in that game is to make it more like sort of accessible and friendlier, because the idea of like lynching somebody is what One Night Ultimate Werewolf is about. And they're trying to take that away and make it more like you're trying to accuse somebody and then they go to jail, you know? So it's just like a much friendlier theme for me to use in my, you know, because that's the type of game that I will play with my kids. Even during the school day, we can get that game out and play like when we have like passing periods and whatnot. It's just that short. Very, very, very cool. So Ultimate Werewolf Legacy is a mixture of Ted Alspach and Rob Davio, and it looks really like a big product. Oh, this would be for TC from our podcast. New Arkham Horror. Did you see this? Like, what? There's a 3rd edition of Arkham Horror now, which I'm like, wasn't Eldritch Horror the newest edition? Why are they coming out with a new Arkham Horror?
Okay, so okay, I can explain this. I demoed it, and I listened to the discussion at the in-flight, and I also demoed it. Okay, so basically what this is they took some of the ideas they had from Eldritch Horror, and they took some more ideas that they had from Arkham Horror, the card game, and they made a new Arkham Horror board game out of them. It's honestly what it is. It's they took those 2 games and they mashed them.
The map looks totally like modular now.
The map is modular so that you can have a different map for each scenario. Whereas like in Eldritch Horror, you're stuck with the same board. In Old Arkham Horror, you're always stuck with the same board. This one, they made it modular so that each of the scenarios in the game can have a different map, so that you're not just like going in the same cycles over and over and over and over again, which often happens in Eldritch Horror. I found that people kind of stick in the same areas because stuff keeps popping up in those areas that you want. With a modular board, you can't quite do that, or at least it changes from scenario to scenario. I felt like it. The interesting part is wholesale from Arkham Horror, the card game, they borrowed the chit bag idea.
Yeah.
So like you draw chits out of a bag to have good and bad effects, mostly bad. That's something that they introduced in Arkham Horror, the card game. And it's in this one, and perhaps even more emphasized, because it seemed like there were a lot of game effects that either put more chits in the bag or took them out. In addition to constantly drawing them for various, you know, skill checks and stuff.
Yeah, the resolution.
So that was different. I felt like the game played like Eldritch Horror, a lot like Eldritch Horror when I was playing it, but it's in the streets of Arkham rather than all over the globe.
Okay, yeah, I think that's what they were looking. That's what I heard from people who were around, because I was like, why do they have both of these? And they're like, well, one's in the global scope, and the other one's on the on the board. That's just Arkham, the city of Arkham. And I was like, well, that doesn't. It's not enough for me, but I understand, if you're playing it like as a thematic gamer, it's like, how those two things can exist, especially since so many people really cannot get enough of the Arkham Horror and Call of Cthulhu type, inspired stuff. So this definitely is fulfilling a niche, and there was always activity at the Arkham Horror 3rd edition demo tables. The Game Right Games had the new Forbidden Sky, and it uses like magnetized pieces where you're going to be building sort of sky bridges, and it has like a spaceship and stuff. I mean, it looks to me, she said that it was comparable, like not any more complicated, but comparable to like Forbidden Desert. So like, you know, like crunchier than Forbidden Island, a little bit more going on there, but kind of that same idea. And it uses some really nice components. They actually utilize magnets to make sure they stay together and represent connections between sky bridges, between areas that are elevated platforms in the game. So looked really, really cool. I had a chance to talk with Eric Lang and Trent. This is one that I specifically wanted to share with you. Smack their hand so hard they would, you know, they would never high five him again. But the main thing that I asked him about was like about his design of Blood Rage and Rising Sun and Chaos in the Old World. And his statement was that those are games he designed for himself, not to just be like big, you know, like to be the commercial sellers. He designed them for himself. And so then my follow-up question was, okay, which one's more you then? Is it Blood Rage? Is it Chaos in the Old World? Or is it Rising Sun? What do you think, Trent?
Rising Sun.
He said it was actually Blood Rage. Which is, yeah, exactly. I was like, I said, well, this will settle it for us. And so I guess you're gonna have to trust me because I don't have him on camera recorded. But he said like Blood Rage is the most game for him, and he designed, I think, Rising Sun to be including more diplomacy style stuff. But it's still, Trent, you don't get me wrong, dude. Like I asked him which one was more him. They're both games he's making for himself. Like you're correct. It's a game he's making for himself. But he did mention that if he were to redesign Chaos in the Old World, he would not even use that same sort of a system. He said that's kind of like the way that he designed that is the way that he used to design, and now he would design it would just be a totally different game if he went back to revisit Chaos in the Old World. So, but Cool Mini or Not was also looking to, they were selling the new expansion to Lorenzo El Magnifico, which I'm hoping to check out. And then also Way of the Panda has been making a little bit of a splash, that it's like actually a really solid, crunchy game that still has beautiful miniatures. But have you ever heard anything about Way of the Panda, Trent?
Nope.
I'm looking to hopefully bring it to our group because it looks like it's going to be a really like a much heavier game that's more of a Euro game, even though it has those nice Cool Mini or Not pieces. I was worried that Sagrada's 5 and 6 player game would not sell. I was wrong. Sagrada's 5 and 6 player expansion sold out at Gen Con. And I guess I don't know how many exact copies they had, but the 5 and 6 player expansion, which I was like, why would I ever want to play Sagrada with 5 and 6, also includes other components that you can use in a non-5 or 6 player game. So the new Sagrada, the huge version of Sagrada that I got a picture of next to you, but there was really, congrats to them on their success with selling that 5 and 6 player expansion. And one of the final things I looked at was Beasts of Balance, which uses like app integration and uses it's like a combination of a stacking game and think like Doodle God, where you're mixing two different things and making new animals. It's got really beautiful pieces. Looks like, to me, it was tough to understand exactly what mechanisms were under the hood of the app integration part of it. It seemed like I was just more like focused on building up animals on top of the physical game, and that the app was just kind of gravy on that. But just in general, like the Sundays crowd was just packed. Like this type of table was absolutely packed. It was packed with families, and a lot of the games that were not selling from Thursday and Friday were selling like crazy. Thursday, Friday, Saturday were selling like crazy on Sunday because they were more your family type audience. And I would say the dealer hall was more consistently packed with people on Sunday than it was on any other day. It was actually the most frustrating day to try to get around because it was always a line, just because so many families were there to try out with the cheaper Gen Con one-day Sunday pass that they do. But they've really attracted like the local family crowd, and just with so many games were selling super well. And I have one last thing to plug here, and that is that Luis, the guy that I met up with and got to spend time with, has this game where I cannot believe that the company Vesuvius Media is able to financially produce this game, because it has like 64 miniatures that are just absolutely beautiful, cartoony looking, unique miniatures. And they're not all unique, I should say. There's like probably about 30 or so, 25 different sculpts, but they're huge. Some of them are huge, like Cool Mini or Not level quality. And they're selling this game for $50 called Dwarves Winter. It's DWAR7S, created by Luis. And he's both the designer and he is the artist, and he would do kind of what Piero has done in other board game conventions, where he actually was doing artwork on the box top for many people if they asked him for it. So he was not only, he was dressed up in like a cosplay outfit to sell his game, but also he was actually doing artwork for people. And I was sad I didn't have the time or didn't really want to ask him to color in my copy. But it was just really awesome, that level of, the spectacle that you'll only get at Gen Con. And Luis was one of the main people that was like creating that sort of feeling. That's why I'm saying that Gen Con seems, at least in the dealer hall, to be feeling more and more like what I've heard people describe Essen as. So that is everything, Trent. What did I miss?
Okay, I actually have several that I looked at that you missed. First I want to mention is that Game of Thrones, the board game, is getting a full expansion.
Ooh, for the second edition, too, the newest edition.
Yes, it takes it up to 8 players. It adds the Targaryens. It adds an extension to the map that covers the coast of Essos. And it also adds the Arryn, covers the coast of Essos. And it also adds the Arryns. So they actually have a map overlay on the old map. You just sit it on top. It gives the Arryns a spot that basically crowds the Starks a little bit, thank goodness, because when I'm playing that, the thing that annoys me the most is that the Starks just have like all the North.
Yeah.
And so this crowds them a little more. Yeah, this crowds them a little more, which I think is a good thing. I don't even want to know what this is like playing it with 8. It's already basically feel like it's diplomacy with a few twists, and this is just more of that. I will most likely get it because it's a new scenario and stuff like that. That's very interesting. The Targaryens play a little different because they have 3 dragon pieces, unsurprisingly. And those dragon pieces like start out the game awful, and then you use cards to build them up and make them better. And
oh my goodness, man, that would be so much more asymmetry than it is already in. I mean, you've already got asymmetrical factions, and your decks are unique to your own thing. Trent, why don't we play this one, man? This is like we both love Game of Thrones. You love diplomacy. I've really enjoyed experiences that integrate diplomacy, though I hesitate to say that I'm the diplomacy crowd. But this seems to me like something that we need to get played. We need to get our guys together and get everybody in playing this one.
Our Sunday nights sometimes tend to be either Cool to the New or Cool to the Euro, and that doesn't really fit in either one of them.
It's such a solid game, man. We are core gamers. This is a game for core gamers. I think we'll have a following for this one. We just need to be bold and bring it and advertise it. And I think there's other players in our group, our local group, that own the Game of Thrones board game and have played them with groups outside of ours. But yeah, I'd say that it's also like one of those almost an event game level, right? Because it can be really, really long.
It can be, sure can be. Okay, so I'm going through my list and marking off the ones I mentioned. We did a full playthrough of My Little Scythe from We've played the full game of it, all 5 of my family members, including my 8-year-old. This game is Scythe. It is simplified Scythe. There's no other There's no other way to put this. It's rather than having like 12 different goals than which you're trying to get 6 stars on them. There's 8 and you're trying to get to 4. I'm trying to think of even differences between it. The player board you have in front of you is definitely simpler. That's really the biggest changes. But you have the same thing where you have different actions on it and you have to move your pawn back and forth. And you can upgrade them. There's a mechanism for upgrading those spots a little bit. It's not nearly as expensive as in base game Scythe, but it's there. The battle mechanism's virtually identical. It's the same game.
You have 3 kids. Their ages 8, 10, and 12.
Yeah, and they had no problems with it. Other than my youngest one got frustrated because he spent all of his battle cards early on beating on his sister.
Oh, well, that's your own fault.
Yeah, he went in and it felt like he needed to conquer his sister. And then he ran out of battle cards, and then everybody fought him to get their battle win, and he was getting really frustrated. But it's something that wouldn't be repeated if he played it again, you know?
No, unless he wants to make the same historical mistake over and over and over.
Yeah, I mean, he beat his sister, but then he had like 0 left on his battle track, battle cards, and so everybody was just like teeing off on him, and he didn't like it.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was Scythe. It's very similar. It's very the art style is very cutesy. It looks almost like My Little Pony, hence the name. Is the style of it. But it's the same. I mean, it's a simplified version of the same game. That's what it is.
Very cool, dude. I was worried about because I don't know when I think of Scythe, I think of I like it for the sort of the fact that it is a heavier game. And when you say My First Scythe, it's like I understand the My First Ticket to Ride because it's like that's a family game, and now you're making it more kids friendly. Would you say this is maybe more of a family weight game than it is a kids game?
It's a family weight game. Okay, the art style might make you think that it isn't, but I think it's a family weight game
because it looks very cartoony. That's what I was referring to. Like the box, I saw the box, and it's very cartoony looking.
I would think with the table of all adults, it would really depend on the adults whether I pull this out instead of Scythe. It would really depend on them, but it's not anything. I mean, it took us about an hour to play it, I would say.
Okay.
My kids luckily have good attention spans. All my kids were involved. My daughter got up from the table. She didn't win, but she was probably in second place and was about to win. And she said that she loved it and wanted to play it again. And she's a 10-year-old girl, so that should. There you go. My 12-year-old son loved it. He wanted to play it again. I kind of hinted to him maybe we should actually try Scythe because I think he'd be up for it. Yeah, it was a solid hit. I didn't buy it, but it was a solid hit with my family. However, the next game I'm going to talk about, my wife, and this is a spoiler for any of my kids listening to the podcast, which I'm sure they don't. My wife says we should get this for our kids for Christmas, and I think she's mostly thinking about our youngest one that just flipped for it, and that's Fireball Island. The Restoration Games remake of it. We played a full game of it.
Nice.
With all kinds of stuff in it, and it's got amazing table presence, as you might expect, because it's just a gigantic 3D map. It's a pretty mechanically simple game. Mostly you're just drawing cards, and your cards mostly let you move around the map, and you're trying to go to various locations. It'll say like move 12. So you move 12 spaces. You're trying to get from place to place, and you're also doing a lot of repositioning of the trees. There's trees all over the map, you know, the 3D trees that are standing up. And they have a little like peg at the bottom of it. And as you rotate the trees, the pegs move, and the peg redirects where a ball is going to go down the map. Like it changes the path a ball would follow. So then other events cause you to take the balls and put them in the mouth at the top. And depending on the angles of all the trees dictates where the ball goes. And if the ball hits some dude on the map, he just falls over and loses a turn, basically. And that can be devastating. It really can be.
The lose a turn mechanic. But I think that the fact that there's all these different redirects and whatnot, I think that's a new element of the game. Like I don't remember, because I've played the original Fireball Island that was in the huge box at Spielbound, the board game cafe in Omaha, where they have a copy of it. And I don't remember it having like as much of the like dexterity, physical physics, I guess, elements of the game being a part of the gameplay.
Yeah, and there's also spots where you can knock marbles down throughout the map, the marbles of the fireballs. And there's more going on too. I played the old one too. There's more going on in this one, but I'm never going to call it any sort of heavy game. But my youngest son was like in love with it. I mean, just comically in love with it. So,
and that's basically your audience right there. That's your audience who's going to grow up, and then he's going to look back nostalgically on that game and want there to be a remake in 30 years. That was
of the gaming. That was his far and away his favorite thing. That and the Destiny tournament was my youngest's favorite things.
Cool.
Of the board gaming type events.
Yeah, because you guys did lots of other stuff, which we've talked, escape rooms and the other like crafting and so many different things.
The version we were playing was 4 players. I did not actually play. My wife did. I just stood around and watched the full game. Sure. And, took kids to the bathroom when they needed to and so on. But the guy there knew I was doing this, and he was telling me about all the different expansions for it and all this different stuff. And then afterwards, when we left, my wife was like, we should get that for the kids for Christmas. And I was thinking to myself, I really wish I had just backed the Kickstarter. I didn't, but I kind of wish I had. We just boxed the whole thing up and give it to him for Christmas. But
I did Kickstarter, Trent, because I thought like, oh, this will be one that that'll work well for our game night. Trying to get like newer players and people like trying to sort of build up the, that we're not just we're not just a Euro group, that we're also, like people who want to play other types of games will be able to play at our game group too. And I thought Fireball Island would be a step in that direction, hopefully. So I did back it. So we'll end up seeing.
I have a feeling we're just probably going to buy it from Restoration and give it as a Christmas gift to all 3 kids.
Sure.
I think we'll probably buy whatever you need to play it with 5. I think one of the expansions changes it to 5.
Yes, I think you have to buy the 5th one, and I didn't buy that one because it was like $25, and it looked like it only came with a painted miniature and like a deck of cards. But the other ones, I think I was really close to backing. I ended up only getting the base game, and then of course that comes with like the deck of cards. I think there's just a deck of cards. It's like the Kickstarter bonus pack, and I think that's supposed to be available from Restoration Games' website. So you should be able to get all the same stuff.
Okay, I'm gonna keep going through the games that I played that Joe did not mention. My son, my youngest son that I mentioned that really loved Fireball Island, we gave each of our kids a stipend to spend money on for souvenirs Gen Con. And when my son saw this, my youngest saw this, he immediately went and spent his credit on it, like his stipend on this. And it was the Choose Your Own Adventure House of Danger game. He loves Choose Your Own Adventure books. Just loves them. Okay. So that's like the age he's at. He's 8, and I mean a fairly precocious reader, so they're like very appropriate for him right now.
Awesome.
And so we got this, and we took it back to the hotel, and it has 5 adventures in it. And we played through the first one, me and him and his mom, because my other 2 kids were like just dead exhausted after a day of Gen Con. And they were already asleep, but he wasn't yet.
Wow.
Anyway, so we played a game of that at the hotel through the first mission. My feeling on it was that it was time stories for that you can play with kids.
Nice. And it's just a book, right? It's just like
no, it's the story is told on cards.
Okay.
But it's basically the cards function like a Choose Your Own Adventure book. There's a lot of text on them and a few illustrations. But then there are items that you get from a separate deck. Some of the choices you make result in you getting items. And you can use those items, and there's also some skill checks where you roll a 6-sided die. I think it was a 6-sided die. And then those items can help you on skill checks. So there's a little bit of game to it, but it's honestly mostly a Choose Your Own Adventure novel that you can do in a group way.
Sure.
And I kept feeling like it was simple time stories, is the way I kept feeling about it, except with all text instead of the pictures.
Well, that would actually make time stories potentially a little bit more in the what I would feel as being a value that was worth me seeking out. So I don't know, but this sounds interesting.
That's what it was, and my 8-year-old had no problem with it. He was like all agog. He can't wait to play it more. We took it home with us.
Of course.
Yeah, so there you go. My wife bought me Taj Mahal.
Yay!
Yeah, the Z-Man Games reprinted it. It's a really pretty edition. I was setting up on Sunday evening to play with my family, but everybody slept because they were all dead from Gen Con, so we didn't play it yet. But it's Taj Mahal. I played it like 10 years ago, and I remembered how to play it, and it's another one of the 90s Kinesia classics. Or
like a fantastic classic. Gotcha.
Yeah, it's a good Kinesia one. It has a really interesting auction mechanic. Oh, wait, it's a Kinesia game. Of course it does.
Of course, yeah. What do you know?
And the last thing I want to mention is one that my wife wanted me to mention because she demoed it with the kids while I was at another event. It's called Anchors Away, and it was published by Z-Man Games. And she said that it was the way she described it to me when they were doing it is it sounds like it was a simpler version of Galaxy Trucker, and that you're doing this real-time grabbing of tiles. And then those tiles convert into points by doing various mechanisms. So you're essentially grabbing tiles and trying to basically, in a way, expect what's coming up in terms of being able to trade at a market. So you're like a ship, and you're a ship sailing around and gathering goods, basically. And you do that by grabbing tiles out of this market in real time and based on a timer. And you're trying to fill up your ship with the tiles. Some of them are visible to other players, and some of them are not. And then you go and dock and you trade those for certain goods. And you don't necessarily know all the traders that are going to be available. You know some of them, but you don't know who else is going to be at the market. And then that converts into points, is the way she explained it to me. And the way she ended up saying that, it felt like when she was playing sounded like how I feel when I play Galaxy Trucker. Like you're trying really hard to get the right diverse set of stuff based on what limited that you know is coming and a lot that you don't know is coming. And then you basically go resolve everything. That's what it sounded like to me. It sounded like a simpler Galaxy Trucker with like a trading theme rather than a spaceship in space theme. So she said it was fun, but she said it probably wasn't one that they would buy because I mean, at some point you have to say, you're not buying a game.
Yeah, draw the line somewhere, right? You can't buy all of them. Right.
Yeah, so I think the game that we would buy for our family out of Incon would probably end up going to be Fireball Island just because of how my kids reacted. But it was a good, solid game that, like, if you like the Galaxy Trucker style of game and want something to play with younger people, that would be a good choice. And that's really all I have to mention that you didn't cover.
Wow, man. Well, our coverage of the convention is very complimentary, I think, that you covered a lot of things you know, specifically like the family side of things. But then there were also other elements like the fantasy flight that you were more thorough on. I think that that our coverage here, I'm very proud of this product that we've this take that we've done together, Trent. And I really thank you, man, for joining me here and for sharing in the experience that was Gen Con 2018. The final thing I'd say, just, you know, is there any overarching like thought? Like for me, I just would really like to encourage publishers to keep on releasing like big titles at Gen Con. Like, we're used to seeing Fantasy Flight do so, but like, I mean, seeing Forbidden Sky, Rise of Queensdale, Yellow and Yangtze. We're talking, I mean, just, I can keep on going, you know, like Newton to a certain extent, to a very small, you know, for a very small amount of copies. I mean, there's so many games that are getting released at Gen Con. And, you know, I'm used to seeing the Gen Con preview and just feeling like, well, these are a whole bunch of games that, you know, there's about 5 to 10 that I'm really that interested in. And most of them are, you know, tend to be catering towards a different market that I'm not as excited about, or they're just, you know, a lot lighter. But I felt like there was a lot of new releases that were getting tried out, and hopefully, you know, that they had success enough to want to continue to release around Gen Con time.
And I'm going to say one more thing, and I'm mostly targeting Cool Mini or Not with this. It is really, really bad and dumb decision-making to bring only 100 copies of a game to Gen Con if it's going to be remotely popular at all. Okay, there's 75,000 people at Gen Con or something approaching that number. Okay, yeah. Like, bringing 100 copies of a game that's going to be reasonably popular is dumb. You want to have people carrying that game to the dealer hall so that other people see it, and it becomes effectively an advertisement for your game.
Yeah.
People carrying around a game as a walking advertisement for them. Ooh, what's that? I want to go see it in the dealer hall. If you only have 100 copies, that's not going to happen. You're just missing out on it. You're also annoying people that get in line for the dealer hall at 10 a.m., run to your booth, and are like third in line, and there's not a copy for them. That's ridiculous. That's a bad decision. Don't do it again. It really annoyed me about Newton.
Would you have rather seen them just not release it, or?
I think you're better off not releasing it than releasing 100 copies. You end up with a lot of people that are frustrated.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't do what you did, which is, you know, kind of like tailored your entire morning towards making sure you could get there. And so by the time
my wife did that. I didn't do. My wife did.
Yeah, she did it on.
She was pretty frustrated. Yeah. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I can understand, you know, she was getting you a birthday present, or, you know, and wasn't able to get it. And, you know, what's crazy is Cool Mini or Not's publishing it, but it's actually like sort of designed in-house by Cranio Creations, who's like kind of sold the license to Cool Mini or Not to distribute it. And so I got a chance to talk with the guy who was like putting it all together, and I was so excited. And it was just kind of weird that like the amount of presence that Newton had did feel like it was almost awkwardly small, and to the point where I didn't even get much coverage on it, even though it was the game that I was, that I'd say Yell and Liangxi would be my number one, and then Newton would be my number two for how interested I was and how much I wanted to get coverage on it. I think they just had mainly, even of those 100 copies, Trent, I think probably a third of those went just straight to like review copies so that that the reviewers will start hyping it. So, I mean, I can see why they wanted to get it in at least as many people's hands as they could. But yes, 100 is a very small amount. And yeah, the disappointment that you feel, I guess it really, what stands to be seen, Trent, is if this ends up being the game that we're hoping it is, will you still get it? And if the answer is yes, then maybe any presence was still better than not having anything and just releasing at Essen. Who knows?
If they had more copies of it out, I'd have a copy in my hands right now. The fact that I don't means I'm most likely to wait around and see if anyone else in our group picks it up and play it with them instead.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and I hope to be in that group that gets it, because this, like, from the way that it was described to me, it's like that Voyages of Marco Polo. Like, it's a little bit closer to Voyages of Marco Polo than any of the other ones that have come out, which I've enjoyed all of them. But Grand Austria Hotel, Lorenzo El Magnifico kind of like pale in comparison to how much I love Voyages of Marco Polo. And this one looks to be a return to what Marco Polo does, but with integrations of the elements that were very cool about those other two games that I mentioned. So, yeah, like I'm excited for this one, but just like you, Trent, I could not, I couldn't get to it. So yeah, it's an interesting thing to like discuss, like the whether or not to release, to how many copies and everything like that. I definitely think that they put it in the hands of the people that are going to get it out to the largest audience first. They had those review copies that were kind of on hold for your Dice Tower, your Watch It Played, your other like large, like the people who you see their videos on everything, and they've got like a much larger following. So anyway, I expect to hear more about Newton from this group, whether or not Trent buys it. Well, Trent, it's been good, man. Thanks for joining me. And any final thoughts?
Nope.
Have a great week of gaming, and catch us next week on The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly.